Efed podcast, the podcast exploring our fantasy wrestling hobby, where the wrestling is written, but the characters are real. I'm your host, Mikey Unlikely, and I'd like to thank you for joining us here on the Atomic Dropcast Network. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to the Efed podcast. Excited to have you here for episode 53. It's going to be a huge episode. We've got Brunk on the show. He's the handler of infamous Dan Ryan. Excited to have him on here and talk about his long history in Efeding and as a wrestling fan as well. We've got a new Efed podcast question of the week. And yes, we've got the first section of the Efed podcast Top 100 Countdown. We're going to be counting down the first 30 or numbers 100 through 71 today. I'm excited to share them with you. It's been a fun experiment doing this tally and reading these results. It's going to be interesting to see how everybody reacts, but you know how the internet is. Everybody goes nuts. Guys, if you want to find us on Twitter, you can do so at the Efed Podcast. That's at the Efed Podcast. And if you want to slide into our little Discord channel, the link is in that Twitter profile. Click on that link, you'll be transported in there, and you can become a member of our Discord of over 140 different Efeders from across the game. Fedheads, handlers, staff members, all kinds of stuff. We've got Caw, Angle, RP, and more. Check it out. It's a fun place to be. We're chatting every day. And we've got the YouTube stuff coming soon. We've got the YouTube countdown videos, so make sure you check out the Efed Podcast YouTube channel as well. And hit that subscribe button. We would greatly appreciate that. What else we got going on? The Patreon, patreon.com/Efed Podcast. Man, we're a busy bunch. We're going to try to sneak another Bad Graps in here at the end of this month and see what we can't do for Thanksgiving. I think maybe because Thanksgiving season, maybe a Survivor Series is in order. We'll see what happens over at patreon.com/Efed Podcast. All right, guys, we're going to dive into the show. I'm excited for it. It's going to be a fun one. Strap in. Here's a word from our sponsors, first and foremost. Please support them like you do our show. You guys are awesome. You listen each and every week. And we would greatly appreciate if you would check out our sponsors as well, at least see if what they got to offer is for you.
Occupy Pro Wrestling, putting the smart back into smart mark since 2012 as we grapple with design and media services for wrestlers, promotions, and podcasters. We strive to enjoy pro wrestling in our community and podcast, centered around interviews with wrestlers and fans alike. If you like what you see and hear, check out the central hub for everything we're doing and the latest from our site partners over at OccupyProWrestling.com.
All right, guys, the Efed Podcast is very happy to announce its brand new partnership over on Facebook with the Social Media Wrestling Association. The Social Media Wrestling Association, along with its 16,000 member strong influence page known as Generational Wrestling Society, has proven to be the true revolutionary Efed company of Facebook. The SWA welcomes written, video, and audio promos for its talent, as well as results provided in live 2K audio commentary and written results. The SWA is more than just an Efed. With GWS, all areas of the wrestling community are covered. From belt collectors, wrestling news, trivia, and podcasts, and Efeds. Check them out on Facebook at Social Media Wrestling Association and Generational Wrestling Society. You can give a search for both. Once you join both, you'll be glad to become associated with the society. And we're going to be posting our show on Facebook exclusively on the SWA and GWS sites. And we're very happy to have announced this partnership with the SWA, and you can hear about it here every week. So guys, go check them out. Social Media Wrestling Association on Facebook.
Defiance, an Angle Fed boasting 8 years of continuous fantasy wrestling. Defiance offers opportunities for original characters, micros, a standalone website utilizing Backstage 3 script, and a forum hosted on the long-running fwrestling.com, as well as a roster full of some of the most experienced writers in the game. Come see for yourself at defiancewrestling.com. That's defiancewrestling.com.
Hey guys, are you digging this podcast? Well, we really appreciate it. I'd also appreciate it if you check out my other podcast. The Atomic Dropcast is a look back at the wrestling of yesteryear through adult eyes. We watch the wrestling that we watched as kids, as adults, with a couple of beers in our hands. It's a great time. Check it out over at atomicdropcast.com. You can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
OCW Fed is a hybrid pro wrestling Efed that combines elements of role play and competitive play using the WWE 2K franchise. Whether you're on PlayStation or Xbox, OCW Fed is a creative outlet for gamers and pro wrestling fans alike. With over 16 years experience producing weekly content and live Twitch events, OCW Fed has a thriving community with handlers from all over the world. If this sounds like your cup of tea, come check us out at OCWFed.com, OCW Fed TV on YouTube, and OCW Fed on Twitch. It's like D&D for wrestling nerds.
Hey everybody, it's Mikey. No, we're not back to the show just yet. First, I want to tell you about my Patreon. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh no, am I going to have to pay for the podcast? No. The answer is emphatically no. The show has been and forever will be free. No, Brunk, you will not have to pay for the podcast. However, we have been asked by a handful of people how they can help support the show. And we've also been asked, mostly by Fuzz, why we didn't have a Patreon yet. And I quote, "You stupid I can't believe you don't have a Patreon. I will hurt you if you don't take my money now." End quote. That was Fuzz. He's a scary dude. So with that in mind, you can find us at patreon.com/efedpodcast. Contributions start as low as $3 a month. Thank you very much for your consideration. Please get Fuzz off our backs. The Efed question of the week is brought to you by the EWC. The Extreme Wrestling Corporation is the game's longest-running roleplay Efed, having been established in 1997. With over 100 active roleplayers across 4 unique brands, the EWC offers opt-in booking on all of its bi-weekly shows. It's home to Stranglemania and the 4-day wrestling festival known as WrestleFest. The EWC is built on its welcoming community with zero bias and no drama. All styles are welcome. Come check out the EWC today at EWC4life.com. That's EWC, the number 4, life.com. All right, guys, this week's Efed podcast question of the week. What is your favorite E-wrestler's name? Ignore the character, name only. What is the favorite name of a character? At Hero Highspot on Twitter, Butlard von Sturtle from back in the ZCPW days. At Ross Hansen GCC, 3 Dong Chong. Yes, this really happened somewhere, and no, it wasn't me. Yeah, right. At SBO Las Vegas, Hard to Choose, Kerry Milano, Gunnar Lang, and Righteous Marks are some of my favorites that I can think of. At PRS_2P, 2 Pretty For You, Ban Blood and Nation. I had no name for the robot, so I used the Fed's acronym. It sounded robotic and it sells well. At Boucher Trey, Odin Balfour. At Godly Ken Davison, Dick Fury. Hey, Ben. Holler at Ben. At JVD Rooster, 2 words, Brody Howitzer. Interesting. Some of these I can see the comedic effect, and others you have to know probably the backstory behind the character in order to really appreciate it. At User Poets, our good friend Pete, the greatest character name in the history of e-wrestling is the King of Guano, Overlord Bob Praxis. Now that's a mouthful. At Mulletsaurus, the Insultin. That's a nice play on the Sultan. At Tamika Kellis, big fan of the Red Riot. And at Distorted Amber on Twitter, this comes from a tag team I worked against about a few years ago, Breaking Kayfabe. And at Claire RBGTL, Dick McLovin. Interesting names. A lot of dicks in there. That's not surprising in the world of e-fedding at all. Over on the Discord side of things, here's what we got for the eFed podcast question of the week. At Seth is Burns, Kodiak Vic Creed, or KVC. At Ross, the Boston Strangler. Interesting. Meg Broke the Chat says Veronica Rochelle, MDG, Warren, featured guest on the show. The current one is Scro, but all time it's hard to argue with Kodiak Vic Creed. There you go. It exudes cool and dangerous. Kodiak Vic Creed gets a second vote now. At Ruzilla, the old school one is Mean Streak. At eWrestling Sweetest Boy, Jake. The Fresh Maker, Devo Tremors. At Alias, Mung Bean. You don't fung with the mung. But a bit more seriously, 12 Gauge Marcellus Torelli sounds like an awesome name to me. Everybody Loves Will says, I mean, come on, La Flama Blanca. Leave it to Will to vote for himself. At Juice10, I was always particular to Castor v. Strife. Interesting. I think I ran across that guy before. I can't remember what Fed we were in together. At John Thompson, TW Combat, Super Balls, XWF Hall of Fame member. At Mike Leo, the one I still remember most was a guy named Daniel Shine. I seen him in an Efed back in 2000. Literally, the place was Game Winners Championship Wrestling Federation. Game Winners. I used to get so many cheat codes off that website. Awesome. At Fella Libby, best name you'll ever hear is Linton My Ass. Linton My Ass. Okay. Ogacity. In 2002, I was in a Fed with Pimpalicious Levon Parks. He wins for me. Hard to argue with that one. At Seth is Burns. If I can add another one, Silky Palms. His bio was the greatest. Silky Palms pimped all across this great nation, and if you get in his way, he'll pimp you too. Pimp on, Silky, pimp on. At Flint Fireforge, Fat Badger. At Miracle Enterprise, the Polish French Fry. And at She's Really Nice, quotations Ross, Killian Surgeon, Digital Mortality, and Dr. Curiosity. Awesome. Thanks for participating this week's Efed Podcast Question of the Week, guys. That was a lot of fun, a lot of interesting names in there. There's a lot of good names out there currently as well. I know a lot of people are pulling from the past, but I look at guys like Silk. I think he's got a cool gimmick and cool name. There's a lot of guys on Twitter that are doing well. Mike Best. It's hard to argue with Best as a last name. So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on out there. Check it out. Of course, you can always find the Efed Podcast Question of the Week pinned to the top of that Twitter profile. And if you drop your answer in the comments, we'll go ahead and read it here on the show. And finally, it's time for the unveiling of the Efed Podcast Top 100 Countdown. It's a top 100 Efed characters as voted on by you, the other handlers in the game. We put it up on Twitter. Vote for any of your favorite Efed characters. You can vote up to 100 names, and you can only vote one time. It was a lot of fun. We went through a ton of applications. For a week of voting, we had 850 E-wrestlers nominated for the list, and over 1,900 votes to be counted. It was wild. It's crazy to see who some of the favorite Efed characters are. I think there's going to be a lot of surprises on the list. There's going to be a lot of expected results on the list and much more. So it's a fun concept, and I'm glad you guys took the time to participate, and I appreciate everyone who sent in their votes. And now I guess it's time for the unveiling of the Efed Podcast Top 100. We're going to start with number 100 and work our way back to 71. At number 100, we've got Samantha Tolson. You can find her on Twitter at @TheSamTolson. Number 99, Ace King. You can find him on Twitter at AceKingEWC. Number 98, Jacob Mephisto. You can find him over at Shoot Project. Interesting Efed. Number 97, Ken Davison. You can find him on Twitter at Godly Ken Davison. Number 96 on the list, Skull Kid number 2. Skull Kid number 2 made the list, and his Twitter account is Skull Kids K Pro. Number 95, Elena Dedraka. You can find her on Twitter at _Lady Dedraka. Number 94, Mac Bain. And you can find him on Twitter at Bain_Mac. Number 93, Steve Harrison, the Miracle Man over in High Octane Wrestling. Steve Harrison made the list. Excited to have him on. I just got to read his stuff just earlier this year. Number 92 on the list, Aokigahara Zombie. You can find him on Twitter at Aoki Zombie. Many zombies were voted for. Apparently there are many zombies in the game, and I was told by another handler they're all handled by one guy. But the only one to get enough votes to make the list was Aoki Zombie, I believe. So there you go. You can find him on Twitter, Aoki Zombie. Number 91 on the list, Matt Lecroy. My good friend Billy. You can find his character over at DefianceWrestling.com. Number 90 on the list, Skull Kid number 1. There you have it. Skull Kid number 2 made it in at number 96. Skull Kid number 1 comes in at number 90. You can find him at Skull Kids K-Pro as well. Number 89 on the list of the top 100 Efed characters, Scion. You can find Scion over at Shoot Project Wrestling. Number 88 on the list is Chris Card, and you can find him on Twitter at @TheChrisCard. Number 87 on the list is Cyrus Bates, new tag team champion over at DefianceWrestling.com. He does not have a Twitter account, but you can check him out at Defiance. Number 86 is Robbie Bourbon, and you can find him on Twitter at RebelliousDink. It's a fun character, it's a fun writer, he does a lot of cool stuff. Number 85, Amber Ryan, and you can find her on Twitter at DistortedAmber. Number 84 on the list, Steve Solex, number 1 dad. You can find him on Twitter at @TheSteveSolex. Number 83 on the list, Theresa Ames. Theresa Ames is another character you can find over at DefianceWrestling.com, but does not have a Twitter account. Recently took on Jay Harvey at our recent pay-per-view Ascension. Number 82, Matt Knox. You can find Matt on Twitter at MRavenK1. Number 81 on the list, Sierra Silver. You can find her on Twitter at RealSisterSin, and you can find her t-shirt over at efedtees.com. Excited to have that up there. Number 80 on the list, American Tommy. And you can find American Tommy on Twitter at American Tommy. Easy enough. There you have it, your first 20 of the Efed podcast, top 100. But we're going to keep it going. So, up next on the list, Charlie J. Hitchens. And you can find Charlie J over at Shoot Project as well. Those guys really turned out to vote, and it showed up in the results. Number 78 on the list, Thad Duke. You can find Thad over at BetterThanYou_TD on Twitter. Thad's been a cool addition to our Discord as well. Excited to have him in there. Congratulations on everybody who's made it thus far. Number 77, The Answer JC. And you can find him also on Twitter at The Answer JC. A guy I recently found on Twitter and was a cool follow. Number 76 on our list is Kyra Johnson. You can find Kyra on Twitter at KJ_Jawdropper. Number 75 on our list, Uriel Cortez. You can find Uriel over at DefianceWrestling.com. Former tag team champion over there. Number 74 on our list, Gabriel Ohio. Former guest on the Efed podcast interview, and you can find him over at Bard Gabriel Ohio on Twitter. At Bard Gabriel Ohio on Twitter. Number 73, up next is Brad Swan. Brad is a member of the XHF Network. You can find him over there at xhfnetwork.com. Number 72 on our list is going to be Anthony Caffrey, another member of the XHF Network. Anthony Caffrey made it at the list at number 72. And finally this week, for our first 30 unveilings, number 71, it's Mr. Rick Diculous. Rick. You can find Rick on Twitter at Rick. That's 3 R's, 3 I's, 3 C's, and 3 K's. Rick's a fun character who was recently over at High Octane Wrestling and New Frontier Wrestling, I believe, but as of late has taken a break from e-wrestling, and I think he's getting raring and ready to come back as soon as the holidays are over. And guys, that's our first 30 of the Efed podcast, top 100 Efed characters. It's an eclectic list. It's people from every side of the game. It's fun, and I'm having a good time. Remember, this is not a contest that means anything. We are giving away a little t-shirt prize at the end for free t-shirt design, and you over at efedtees.com for number 1. But otherwise, this is just a fun experiment we wanted to do with Twitter. Obviously, it's just a matter of who voted and who didn't. So there's our first 30. We've got 30 more coming at you next week, so stay tuned for that. Pay attention to the YouTube channel. We will have the unveiling of the list there as well, and along with some video representation of myself against a green screen and tripping over all of our fun equipment over here. Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Efed podcast interview series. Today I'm joined by a legend in the game, a guy who's been playing forever, longer than I have. A guy who's still playing. He's over in High Octane Wrestling, former Defiance alumni. Talking about Brunk. Dan Ryan is the character. Brunk, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Doing really good. We're going to have a contest today to see who's got the deeper voice.
Yeah, that's fun.
We're both dads and husbands, and that's kind of we got to have that dad voice sometimes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Put the fear of God in them. So thanks for taking the time to join us, buddy. It's been a long time.
Yeah, man, no problem.
We've had you on the Bad Graps a couple times. That's a lot of good fun. And you're a former patron, or you are a patron?
Oh, I still am.
Awesome. Appreciate your support.
I just throw money at anything, you know.
It's been a lot of fun. So let's talk about you. How did you get into professional wrestling? When was it, and what caught your eye first?
I was probably like 7 or 8 years old, I think, which for me means early 80s. I had a relative. She was my grandmother's twin sister. My grandmother had died when I was really little, and so she kind of took over as like doing like grandparent duties with me.
Yeah. And
so I used to go over like on weekends and just spend the night. It was just, you know, something that me and my sister did. And she was a wrestling fan, and she always had it on Saturday nights, which down here it was Houston wrestling. I don't know if you know much about Houston wrestling. It was Paul Bosch, and it was like world class guys and NWA guys and Mid-South people, and so it was the Southern wrestling scene that we got.
All I know of that is what I heard from Bruce Pritchard.
Yeah, so it would have been like, you know, Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Butch Reed and like Terry Taylor, and like the big scary guy was Kamala, right? So terrifying to everyone. So all those Southern guys that came through, you know, the Von Erichs being Texas, of course, and the Funks, and we're still kind of around. But yeah, I mean, I just kind of went from there. I didn't get WWF at the time, I guess, until, God, man, it was like around WrestleMania 3 or so. So it was all of that Southern kind of Mid-South. And
by then you were a teenager.
No.
For WrestleMania 3? Oh, no, maybe not.
WrestleMania 3. No, that would have been like 87 or so. Maybe it was 87? Yeah, I guess it was about 87.
87, yep.
So, yeah, about 86, 87. So I heard about that stuff, but, you know, in the Stone Age before the internet and stuff, it was just like, you know, what kids talked about at school and stuff. And the thing that I specifically remember as the first time really paying attention to WWF stuff programming was people talking about, like, at the bus stop that, you know, he was fighting Andre the Giant, right? That was the thing. And so everybody being like, you know, we don't know anything about anything. We think they're really fighting because we're stupid. We're children. We're morons.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing is like, oh, there's absolutely no way he's beating Andre the Giant. Everybody knows who this guy is, right? So my first real memory of paying attention to the WWF was him beating or finding out the next day, because we never buy pay-per-views or anything.
Sure.
It was just finding out the next day that Hogan won that match, and then I was like, oh crap. And then I think we started getting the programming and just started watching from there.
Oh man, he got body slammed.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So who were your favorite wrestlers then? Like, say all time, who are some of your favorite wrestlers?
Okay, so I mean, it shouldn't surprise you that I tend to lean towards heels.
No, of course
not. That won't surprise you at all. I would have said over the years, in those kind of mid to late 80s time when I was a lot younger, it was like Jake Roberts.
Okay.
Macho Man, of course. I did like Steamboat, even though he's like the classic babyface, but I didn't see a lot of Ric Flair until later. I didn't see a lot of Ric Flair until, I don't know, probably like around 90 or so. Because surprisingly, like so what happened was all like the television contracts for my part of the country, when the Southern wrestling started getting bought out by Vince, and he started taking over all the territories, he bought the TV contracts too. So we got WWF television, but not NWA television. So I didn't see like weekly Flair and stuff. The only place I saw that was on like, in magazines. Like I'd see the old Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I loved Flair later. I liked Rick Rude a lot.
Rick Rude's great. Yeah.
During his WWF run. So that early era, those were the guys that I liked.
And did you stay into wrestling through the 90s into the Attitude Era?
Yeah. Yeah. So I watched through the Attitude Era. I didn't really stop. I had like a break right after the Attitude Era, like when Cena happened, I guess. So like
the Ruthless Aggression Era.
Yeah, the Ruthless Aggression Era and like the original Evolution era, that group, I wasn't watching at that time. But, before that, I watched everything just like I guess everybody did probably.
That's awesome. And in the 90s, who were your favorites?
So what I recall, well, DX, of course.
Yep.
Again, the heel thing. But I look back, it's kind of stupid. I think a lot of that's really stupid. Like, it's really hard for me to go back and watch a lot of that stuff.
Like if you saw your kid do it, you'd be like, stop it.
This is dumb. This is so dumb. But I mean, also, I'm probably just really hard on myself that way. I just kind of think that is, I don't know. But yeah, I like DX. I liked, Undertaker's great, and I don't care, who you are. That's an obvious one. And
yep.
I was a big DX guy at that time, I would say. I never let that kind of bleed over into my Efedding, thank God. I wasn't one of those guys, but yeah, I liked those guys at that time.
So Dan Ryan's never said suck it.
No, I've never had one of those guys. No,
good.
Fortunately.
Okay. Well, what about today? You still watch wrestling?
Honestly, I haven't watched it since WrestleMania at all.
It's tough without fans.
Yeah, that's real weird for me. It's such a big part to me of the experience. It's just really weird. I tried it. I don't know. This might be the end for me with wrestling, to be honest, because I feel like if I get so far out of it that I just don't feel a pull back to it, that I don't know if I'll go back.
Yeah.
No, I just don't know. But I also haven't really spent a lot of time watching AEW yet, and I kind of want to. I just haven't. So that might be the last shot at getting back.
Redemption.
Yeah. So.
Well, good stuff. All right. Well, let's talk about how you found e-wrestling.
Okay, so I mentioned the Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazines before.
Yeah.
They used to, it was just, for people who don't know, it was just kayfabe magazine, right? It's just they pretend like it was all very, very real. They had rankings, all these stories about whatever. Well, they used to have like an ad section in the back. They'd sell products or they'd sell games or whatever. And one of the things that they had back there in the back was play-by-mail fantasy wrestling. And it was very creatively named the Imaginary Wrestling Association, which is
IWA.
Yeah. So they have some real marketing geniuses over there. I know some people listening to this will know what I'm talking about.
Don't try this at home.
Yeah, so it was really it's especially stupid when you look at it from like a modern perspective. It was basically they give you a list of like 90 moves or holds, right? And like the first 60 could be numbered anywhere from 1 to 30 in point value. There'd be 2 at 30, 2 at 29, and so on, right? All the way down to 1.
Okay.
Right? So then holds 61 through 90 would be a maximum. It would be anywhere from 31 to 45. So those were effectively like setup moves, right? So like the thing right before your finisher.
Okay.
Right. So like a signature or something, but not signatures. They were just named. They were just regular wrestling holds and moves. There's bigger moves like belly to belly suplex or pile driver or something, right?
Okay.
So basically what they do is they would randomly assign these point values every month or they call it a cycle because it was more like 3 weeks or so every month. You would send in a strategy. You'd pick holds essentially for your character. And then based on the randomly assigned point values, you'd win or lose matches, which you would pay $1 each for.
Okay.
And that's the part that's stupid. Because why would you ever pay for that?
Pay to lose. Yeah.
Right. Well, why would you pay for fantasy wrestling? As a modern person now, that sounds like the dumbest thing you could possibly ask to do. I mean, imagine trying to sell that now. Hey guys, pay me $1 per match. I can't imagine selling that now.
I'm taking notes.
But yeah, right. Brian, get on that right away. So, I was like 14, maybe. This was like 88, 89. And I did that and I paid them real money to get nothing in return.
So basically you're paying postage plus like $1 every month.
That's right. That's right. Now they would send you back like a fully like fleshed out, like 8 to 10 page results kind of magazine, I would say, but it was paper. It wasn't like glossy or anything, but like they'd give you a big thick thing of results and you could send in like a little blurb of what we would consider a promo, right? They had like a trash talk section, but it was mail, right?
So it would show up in the magazine,
right?
The results, yeah,
right. But it was snail mail, right? So we're talking about you write a little paragraph and then you see it 3 weeks from now in a paper.
Yeah.
There wasn't really any direct contact with other players, really. Now, at some point, there was some sort of system set up where you could send in like a request to like contact another person, and then they had to like accept. It's just convoluted, anyways. Yeah. Who cares about any of this? So I met a friend through that who we would set up. We were still able to set up like little like stables and things. Right. The ins and outs of that, probably not too interesting, but it just, you could create little stables. And I happened to get into a little stable, with another guy his name was Chad Dupree. Some people will recognize that name. And he eventually, went and started an email based Efed, right? Which I didn't know what that was at that time.
Yeah.
So Chad did that, and he kept kind of like, bugging me to, by this time, we had each other's phone numbers and stuff. We're actually, we're friends and stuff. So he was, asking me to do that. It kind of bugging me. And finally I went ahead and did that. And that's how it really started.
So what year is this that now you have a computer and the internet?
So that's probably, I kind of jumped ahead. I don't want to tell you, give you like every year, but
sure.
That probably would have been like 96 or so, around 96. So that like whole 90s period, I was just doing like play by mail, but I would also like during that time there were like you remember America Online, right? AOL.
Absolutely, yeah.
So AOL had their message boards where they had some fantasy wrestling stuff going on. Prodigy, which was another internet service, had message boards where they had some of that stuff going on. And I kind of lurked on a couple of those, but I never did kind of make the jump into either of those. So it wasn't until Chad did his, and it was just email based, where you would like send in a promo to appear on the show through email, right? And then he would write the matches, right? And it was all kind of based on your promo ability, basically.
People are still doing that to this day, which is crazy.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I've covered one of those feds on here before. I believe it's TCW/Rage. Check them out on Facebook if you want to get into a email-based wrestling promotion in 2020.
Hey, whatever floats the boat.
But it's cool. But it's awesome. I mean, that is like what happened before modern e-wrestling.
Right. I mean, we just used what we had at the time.
So you got into email, doing that and cutting promos. And so how did that? Were you there for a long time? Did you work your way up the card there?
Well, I did work my way up the card there. That was where Dan Ryan was created for that.
Okay.
For that fed. That was New Breed Wrestling, which I know there's been some other feds called New Breed Wrestling.
Sure.
But Chad's New Breed Wrestling was where I created that character. He did pretty well. It was fun. I liked, obviously coming from like a play by mail environment. It's much nicer to be able to get more instant kind of feedback or gratification, I suppose, if you write something and you get some instant reaction from somebody. It
was much better than written snail mail.
Well, you would never get any like response in snail mail. Like you read that little trash talk blurb, but no one's answering that. I mean, what are you going to do? Wait another 3 weeks to get an answer, and then
whole shows happened.
Yeah, it's kind of silly. So that's kind of how that was where he was created, and that was the first one. And then he moved from email. I don't know how he got in touch with the guys who ran FW Central, which was Chad Merritt, right? Was the main guy. I don't know how he got in touch with him, but he started. I really don't know the details, but anyways, he ended up kind of closing or converting New Breed to another fed that was going to be hosted on Chad's, because Chad would like host
other e-feds,
host other e-feds, and have the forums there on FWC, and that's how I got into that circuit.
So then you moved basically from email to a forum fed,
right? Well, they were still really focused on the website itself. Websites were kind of early at that time. You know, I mean, we know that the websites we're talking about with the GeoCities and the Angel
Big Joe GeoCities,
yeah. So, but because it was kind of early, and it was like at the time to us kind of a cool little thing. I think a lot of the actual the shows and everything almost entirely was centered on the website, and the forums were just like a place to chat. Right. So
your OOC area.
Right. Your OOC area. And it wasn't until later that it started moving more to the forum.
Interesting. Yeah. So those were the early ages. I mean, I remember GeoCities and Angel Fire and big forum feds and things like that. And especially some ugly ass forums that.
Oh yeah.
People,
even the ones we thought looked good back then looked pretty terrible. So.
Yeah, compared to what people can do now.
Yeah, pretty terrible.
So Dan Ryan was made. So you mentioned he was made in that fed. Who did you use in the prior fed, the play by mail fed?
Oh man, those I don't even remember. Now there was actually the Ego Buster thing it's like Dan Ryan's thing. There was another guy that I knew. In the IWA, who had a wrestler called the Ego Buster, only just the Ego Buster, no Dan Ryan, right? No name to it. It was just the Ego Buster, and he wasn't, he was staying with that, or he wasn't. I think we just had like a conversation, and I was just like, I kind of like that name, which isn't really that good of a name. I don't think it's that good of a name. I kind of wish it wasn't stuck to me, but I liked it at the time, and I was like, can I use this name? I'm going to do this, email thing. Can I use this name? And he didn't really care either way. And so actually I should say when I started the email thing and I created the character, it was just the Ego Buster. That was his name. I didn't give him an actual name until much later. He was just like a gimmick.
I hear you. I've been there.
Yeah, he didn't resemble the current character almost in any way.
So tell me about early Dan Ryan then. Tell me, what was the character like? Obviously he was the Ego Buster Dan Ryan, but
so he was just me talking shit. Mm-hmm. Basically, that was as much thought as I put into it.
Yeah,
there wasn't, which is to say no thought. I put no thought into it. I had to you had to describe him and like give a move set. So I considered like what was interesting to me, and at that time I had another friend of mine who would send me like VHS tapes of stuff that I couldn't get down here, right? So that was how you would get exposed to wrestling that you didn't see. I would get this was like 96, 97, like I said. So he would send me. He was in Philadelphia, so he would send me he would send me ECW tapes. Right. And he would send me tapes from Japan. And I still have some of these in my garage, believe it or not. He would just send me these tapes of just all this great wrestling that he loved and thought was great. And I would get this was like extra super early Jericho in Japan, for example. And like Chris Benoit in Japan is like Wild Pegasus and all this stuff that I just never saw. And, they were all doing stuff that the WWF was not doing, right? They didn't do all the more modern like move sets and the more high flying stuff you wouldn't see like on WWF TV.
Yeah, it was crazy. You're just wide eyed and you're full of wonder when you see stuff that's brand new to you.
Right. So my early kind of concept for what kind of a wrestler he was, as far as just the wrestling itself, was like a kind of a combo like Steiner Brothers era Scott Steiner.
Okay.
Before Big Papa Pump, like when he was like
Michigan Jack
wrestler. Yeah, that Steiner, kind of with like I like Gary Albright in Japan. I don't know if you know him too much.
Yeah.
But so he's a strong style guy, right? From that time, and so kind of a combo of those two guys. So some of the stuff I still have like in his moveset, just some of the head dropping stuff. The overhead belly to belly, that kind of stuff. But that was like the original concept. Beyond that, it was just, as far as, there was no character development. It was just me talking trash. So, and not being that good at it, I was like, however old I was, 22 years old and kind of stupid.
That's how everybody starts when they start doing the trash talk promo feds.
Sure.
So Dan Ryan is evolving into now forum feds and website feds. Where did you go next?
So he, I want to say, I know I'm going to screw this up, and like probably Pete's going to correct the crap out of me later. But NBW merged, I want to say merged with EWI, which was Eric Ziba's fed. I don't know if you know who Eric Ziba is. He'll probably come up later. But they, like Warren, for example, he was in EWI, Deacon Warren. He was in EWI, I think actually right before this time. I think he had just left like when I got there or something, but they merged together, and that formed GXW, which is where my forum handle comes from on the FWC. If you ever see D Brunk GXW, that's what GXW is. That was Global Extreme Wrestling, and I always just kept that as the forum name, because that was like the starting of the point where, at least on that circuit, I started to get a lot of attention.
Sure.
And so a lot of people just knew me by that handle.
That's how they message you. That's how they find your stuff, so on and so forth.
Right. So as the time just passed by, I just always thought, let's just leave it alone. There's really no reason to change it. I left it. And so GXW was like, I guess at that time, kind of like the first sort of place where I really, really excelled. Like started like getting into more of a like a dominant kind of run.
Okay.
And so GXW is how I got kind of brushed up against CSWA, which is, I mean, CSWA, I don't know, but I kind of got into some trouble with them because I'm kind of an asshole.
I see we're going to get into it later with the questions.
Yeah, some of that's going to come up. But basically, that issue, it's kind of funny. That issue is basically that they had CSWA was like the undisputed best or most storied Efed in that circuit at that time. Now, they had a long history going back to like 1988.
Wow.
That's so far back that they were like doing results by rolling dice. So that was like 8-9 years before I knew really much about it. At this point, which was like 97, 98, maybe it was a little later. That might have been around 2000 by now. Somewhere in there. Anyways, they were like the kind of undisputed, like huge Fed in our circuit, and we were kind of up and coming. And I kind of have a tendency to get like a chip on my shoulder when there's like somebody telling me that they're better
bigger,
than I am.
Yeah,
bigger, better than I am in some way. I'm just kind of a fighter that way, and that in real life too. And so there was this thing. There was a character in GXW and had been in EWI too, named Evan Aho. Some people will know that name, some won't. But he was our champion, our world champion, or one of the champions. I think he was the world champion. And he, I was starting to get to where like kind of, and I think it's kind of dumb to get territorial like this now, but I was very territorial about, people not giving us the respect that I thought we deserved. Right? A little chip on my shoulder. And so at this time he went to, and Chad was one of the co-owners. Chad, the one I mentioned before, was my good friend, and Eric was the other co-owner. So he went to Chad and Eric basically and told them, well, look, it's the whole, we've heard this a million times, which is, I just don't have time to do this anymore right now. I need to take some time off, blah, 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 blah. You've heard that a million times from people who want time off. So he wants time off. Everybody's like, okay, understandable. Great. Take your time off. So, that's fine. So they take the belt off of him, or I don't get into specifics. I don't remember the specifics exactly. Anyways, they give him his, they write him out of stories, whatever. Like 2 weeks later, the character pops up on CSWA and wins the world championship. Right? He's world champion over there. So I'm like, man, fuck this guy.
What happened to that break, man?
I was just like, fuck this guy, man. Like, really fuck this guy. And so I was not, I think I'm a pretty diplomatic and even keeled person now, and I think most of my friends know me as that. But I wasn't that then. And what I decided to do was I kind of talked our co-owners into inviting him back for like a goodbye show, like a tribute kind of thing, to a GXW, not a GXW. Yeah. GXW show for like a goodbye, like tribute show to him.
Yeah.
Cause he'd been Fed for a while. And they're like, okay. And I said, but we're not going to give him a tribute. And so he agreed to do it because why wouldn't he? Because he's a nice guy and we're nice guys and he's not expecting any funny business. So we get him to go on the show, and I believe that I wrote the segment. I'm pretty sure I did. But basically, I had won the world championship after he left, right? I think he gave it to someone else, and then I beat the next person for it. So the segment in a nutshell was he came out for his tribute. I kind of beat the shit out of him. I cut a promo on him, CSWA, their championship lineage and their parents and
Their parents.
and ancestries and anything else you can imagine, just to insult the hell out of their entire Fed and everything they're all about, and basically told them to go fuck themselves.
So you were not on the Christmas list.
No. So needless to say, Chad Merritt, who as you know, to this day runs the hosting and everything for that circuit, right?
Wrestling, yep.
Even though he's not even doesn't come around anymore. Not happy. Not too pleased with it. This is, that, and not beyond just being the circuit and then him running the circuit. That was his Fed. It was the original Fed on the circuit. He wasn't very happy about it and sort of immediately, messaged me privately. And I'm like, at that time, I'm like, yeah, what? I do. What?
It's done. Right. What's done is done. If he dies, he dies.
Right. I didn't care. I really didn't care. I was fine either way. I was kind of too young and stupid to even think about consequences. I don't think I cared about consequences. But strangely enough, over the next few weeks or so, it started to become more of a thing. Like I was like, I think I might have mentioned it actually, I'm not sure. I think I might have mentioned it first. I think I said, hey, what if I showed up on one of your shows? Because it was getting to be kind of notorious, the whole thing about what happened. Because it was just, if you want to get down to it, you don't do that.
No, right? You don't take someone else's handler. Yeah, character.
No, you don't take liberties. You absolutely do not do that. It's a huge no-no. It was no less a no-no then than it is now. It was not something you do. I just didn't care, right? But I think I mentioned, hey, what if I just showed up on one of your shows? Because his entire roster hated my guts, right? Like legit hated my guts, all these guys. And a lot of these guys are like good friends of mine now, right? But at the time, for good reason, hated my guts because of what I did, right? I said, well, what if I show up on one of your shows? And he's like, well, why would I do that? Why would I let you go on one of my shows? I said, well, I'll go on your show and you can beat me up as revenge or whatever, and we'll do something with this. There's heat, right? There's all kinds of heat on this.
Yeah.
I just thought there was loads of heat. I was like, well, why wouldn't we take advantage of this heat? If you care at all about a good story, if you don't, then fine, I'll go away. That's cool. I could just go back to GXW. I'm still the world champion. No big deal. Or we can do something with this. There's tons of heat on it. And he agreed. He said, yeah, there's tons of heat on it. That's right. And I think the fact that I was willing to immediately let his guy, which is Hornet, right? The famous Hornet.
Always wins.
Always wins. So I told him, no, I'll show up and you'll jump me from behind or something. Get your heat back or get something or put something more on it, right? I was fine with it. So we did. And I came in. Everybody hated my guts. It was the best heat you could possibly imagine. I was thrilled. I was thrilled with it. It was great. And that's how I got into CSW. And that was kind of like the big break on that circuit.
That's awesome. That's a cool way to get into a Fed. You kind of backdoored it.
To be an asshole. Yeah.
Well, cool. So you got into CSWA, and what did Dan Ryan do there? Well, first of all, did you ever go back to GXW and lose your belt?
Yeah. No, this was, like I said, I want to say by now, this had to have been like 2001 or so. I'm trying to get these dates right. I'm probably not quite right, but I was still world champ at the time that I went into CSWA with this angle. Of course, the guys who ran GXW were fully on board. They were fully aware and involved, right? It wasn't just like I wasn't like going into business for myself here or anything.
Oh, okay.
So I was showing up on the CSWA show as the GXW world champion, right? So this was, I want to say, before Invasion angles quite had ruined themselves. Like there have been 1,000 of them now, but this was still kind of fairly early. We weren't the first to do it, of course, but it wasn't like worn out yet, right? So, I was still world champion, I think, for a little bit there while I was running that angle. and like some of our guys would like pop up on their shows. And I remember the first like collection of matches I had were I would just post a thread for doing like an open challenge to anybody who wanted some, really. And so there would be like a line. There was like a line of people. I remember that's how I met Jamar Short. You know Jamar Short?
Yeah, he's on the interview list.
Right. So I met him. He was like one of the first people. He was like on the other side of. He was like, "Fuck this guy! How dare he do this shit?" You know. So I remember him telling me specifically, like, so he came at me immediately because Jamar's he's really good at this stuff, and he came at me pretty immediately, and we had a match like right away. Like maybe it was like my second or third match on the Fed, and he posted something. Now he didn't really here was the weakness of these guys though, right? So they were in the CSWA, which is, like I said, was the recognized best Fed in that circuit. So they didn't read all of our little Feds. Right?
So they weren't familiar with you at all.
They weren't familiar with me at all. So he came right at me. I think that I remember pretty clearly he dropped first, right? And it was trash talk, and it was solid trash talk. And then I hit back. And now this was in the day where you would we had nothing to do. So it was like post in the morning. There's a reply at lunch. There's a reply at dinner. There's a reply before bed, right? It was kind of ridiculous how often. I remember he told me maybe like 4 or 5 months later when we started kind of becoming friends a little bit, he was like, when you responded to my first one, he was like, oh shit, I'm in trouble. Like I might be in trouble here because they didn't read our stuff at all. And it was, they just didn't know.
But meanwhile, you were familiar with them.
I was familiar with them because I did my homework. Which is something I'm always going to do. I'm not ever going to fly blind in any situation. That doesn't mean I'm going to get it right the first time, right? I mean, because that's not necessarily how it goes, but I'm definitely going to at least know who you are.
Yeah, do some kind of research. I don't want to get it wrong. If nothing else, don't get it wrong.
Yeah, so that's that whole angle. I mean, there's that angle went on for a while. There were other people involved who I don't know, didn't really see it through as much as I was willing to see it through. And so eventually I just kind of absorbed myself into the roster, just became a roster member or whatever. But I still had, by this time, kind of been able to build my own like CSWA based heat and not just relying on the invasion stuff.
Yeah,
so,
new stories within the Fed.
Yeah, so like the big like world championship break for me on that entire circuit, I would say, which kind of put me up as one of the names in that circuit, was they gave me a world title shot, and it was just on a regular weekly show. And the world champion was a guy named Mark Wyndham, and I think his name's going to come up. I think Lindsay put his name in that list. Stephen Thomas is the handler. He was one of the co-founders of CSWA, and he wrote, and they still had like the motivation to like really come hard, right? I mean, I still did what I did, even though it's kind of smoothed over by this point. And I won the championship on a weekly show, and I he was really good, and I just kind of did the best I could. I was actually fairly shocked that they did it, that they did the switch, because it was a role play Fed, but you never know. You never really know
what's going on behind the scenes. Yeah,
right. I mean, I don't. There's very few Feds that I know of that are really truly strictly role play. Like there's always some other factors, even if it's just like a subconscious bias of some kind, where you might read one guy that's as good as another guy, but the first guy, like, but I've known this guy, he's reliable, I'm sticking with this guy.
Exactly.
Something like that, So I was a little surprised that it happened. That was the first that was like the first one that to me at the time felt like a really big deal.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the biggest one of your in your group and where you were playing the game. So why wouldn't it be the biggest one you could achieve?
Yeah, that was like, I want to say that was like 03, something like that, 2003, I think.
So you're top champion there. And is this when you decide you're going to start opening up your own Fed?
So I want to say, yeah, it was around 2000. So I didn't actually open Empire Pro. So Empire Pro Wrestling, if people don't know, that was the one. But basically how that happened was there was another handler in GXW. I remember I was still in GXW at this time. In fact, I was probably doing a couple of Feds or kind of trying to branch out a little bit this time. But there was another handler in GXW. His name was John Miller. That was the character and the handler's name. So he made the same mistake Andy Murray did.
Famous tennis player.
Which he's gonna, yeah. So, so John was a pretty good role player. He won some championships in GXW and stuff, and he was doing well. And he just kind of got it in his head that he wanted to try to start a Fed, right? Which a lot of us, have, or a lot of people have.
Sure.
He wanted to start a Fed. He asked me if I would help him start the Fed, and I didn't really want to. I knew it was going to be a lot of work, and I didn't really want to commit to something like that. And he was like, okay, I understand. He's like, I still want to do this thing. And he came back to me, and like, again, I think I was maybe CSWA world champion at this time, and I might have been GXW champ also. I don't remember exactly, but I had some stuff going on, let's just say. And he came back with the idea of, well, okay, if you can't help me run it, can you maybe either handle in the Fed, or can you maybe there's some other way that you can kind of help me get this off the ground. I liked him. We're friends and stuff. And so we ended up coming up with just like an angle where, he was going to have his, tournament to establish a first world champion. Right. And so I said, well, what if Dan Ryan is like the authority figure in the Fed? Right. It's just like, I don't have to do a ton with that. Like, I can write segments and promos and things as this in his Fed and help him, because it kind of gives like a rub to the Fed if one of the bigger characters is like the kayfabe owner or something, right?
Sure.
So we ran this angle where, I entered the tournament as a competitor, but ultimately there was another character, and we kind of had a bunch of like options to go with in case, because it was kept pretty strictly role play judged, right, throughout the tournament. He wanted a legit, world champion out of it. But it kind of ended up perfectly to where we had this other character who I had a little history with. And so we were able to run the angle without the other guy's knowledge, which was fun because of the reveal at the end. But we kind of ran it to where he beat me, like, to knock me out of the semifinals, this guy. So then when he won the championship in the finals, he had like this gloating moment, and that's when there was the reveal, like, well, guess what? I'm the owner. So that was kind of how that happened. That was the beginning of Empire Pro. It was like maybe 4 or 5 months later, John was already kind of done with running a Fed. He was like, fuck it, I'm out. And so another guy named Jeff Bolachowski was his name, and then Ryan Strasma. You know Strasma, right?
Yeah, he's currently in Defiance.
So Strasma was there with Rocco Damon. Him and Jeff and me had I didn't want it to die because I was enjoying it. I was enjoying being a part of it. So the three of us kind of co-ran it. Like, we were like VPs or whatever of the Fed. And we ran it for a while, and it was fun. But kind of like one by one, they both eventually kind of dropped off, and that's how it ended up being just me. I want to say by late 2004, it was just me.
And then it became your Fed.
Yeah, then it became my Fed.
And what did you learn from that experience of being a Fed head?
Are we into is this one of the questions already?
No.
Well, one thing is that by the time that happened, I had started to get my first kind of case of burnout.
Okay.
I had kind of started. So that 2004, I think, I mean, again, some other people could probably correct me if I'm not right on this later, but I think 2004 was the year when I had kind of branched out a little too much. I was in like 4 or 5 different feds, and there was one period there in that year where I had the world championship in I think 4 of those feds at one time, and it was like a full-time job is what it felt like. And that was like the height of like the craziness of just doing way, way, way too much all at once. And I just remember thinking, well, why don't I just stop handling for a bit, and I'll pull way back on the handling, and I'll run the Fed. And I kind of like the idea of like using whatever sort of rub I had to help people who were trying to get over. I've always liked booking. I've always liked thinking up, stories. I watched wrestling when I was growing up. I always thought either, that's great, or maybe I'd do this differently, or, I just liked it. I liked that idea. And so I started like leaving feds, like as I would drop, I maybe even suggest like, maybe I need to, how about you kind of book me to drop this, or maybe I can drop this. I started like dropping the belts and kind of pulling way back. And I would only do like big events, or like I guess I started doing like the Undertaker schedule.
The retirements were, yeah.
Yeah. So like you have a match at WrestleMania, or one match at Survivor Series, and nothing in between. Right. So I would do like Ultra Title, or I would do Holzerman's team tournaments, or whatever, little special events. But then most of my time was spent just running Empire Pro during that time. And I started to just really enjoy, I guess you could say kind of with some people, like coaching people up, or like trying to like talking to people about their characters and like fleshing out their characters, or maybe they don't need my help. Maybe they just need an opportunity or something, right? Because there are lots of people who, are fairly talented, but a booker or, a fedhead will just never see it. You just don't see it. So you don't spend any time on it. Right. And so if you already don't really know what to do to get to the next level, well, you're not going to figure that out on your own. So I kind of thought that if I had attained some sort of something in that circuit, then I could kind of use that to, do that for some other people, I guess.
There you go. So the best part of it for you was just coaching up others and helping them get better.
I still like booking stories. I just don't want to do all the writing. That's it.
Here's the overview. All right, get to work.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, good. So you ran Empire Pro, and when did that come to an end?
So Empire Pro ran from 2000. I had it from 2004 to 2014. It was a 10-year run.
Damn.
Yeah, so 10-year run, and it was great. Most of it was really great. I was really, proud of what we did. We had really good writers. We had really good, a really good collaborative like atmosphere. I had the final say, so I liked being the only one with the final say, because that way, if you don't like something, you can just blame me, right? If you don't like it, just blame me. So just come to me. Don't bitch at anybody else, because I'm the one that makes the decision. Just come to me. I kind of liked it that way, but at the same time, I had a lot of people who helped with various things. I had good match writers. I had handlers suggesting angles and coming up with their ideas, and they would, they'd pitch an idea to me. I'd say, yeah, it sounds great, or hey, maybe we work on this, or we just talk through and make it better, or maybe they already have it. It was just fun. It was a lot of fun. I met, some of my better friends there. I met, I didn't meet Lindsay there, but Lindsay broke through there as like a top person.
Yeah.
In the hobby. She broke out there.
You saw her come up there.
Yeah, so I met Lindsay in another circuit. There was another set of forums called A1 Wrestling. I don't know if you know what A1 Wrestling is. It's gone, long gone now. And so they had an EFED on their site, just A1. It was just A1 Wrestling, and Lindsay was in that group with some other people who will probably come up in some of the questions later. But she was specifically told by the bookers at A1 that she would never be a world champion. Specifically told, because she's a girl. Basically. You cannot be.
Listen, this is not a game of skill. This is a game of manliness. Let's be honest.
Right. So they just told her outright, doesn't matter how well you write, you will never be a world champion here. Right. So when she came over to EPW, we met there. We talked behind the scenes, just like I talked to. I tend to like reach out to people who I just see something they wrote and I think it's good or funny or whatever. Oh, that's great. That's pretty funny. And just strike up conversations. And I met her that way. And she came over to EPW, and I told her, look, it's going to be on your writing. I will give you a shot. And I wasn't entirely sold on. We've talked about this privately, right? That I wasn't entirely sold on. I need that story to be told realistically.
Yes.
Women fighting men, right? So, Nikki Bella, and we had this conversation, like Nikki Bella and Brock Lesnar. No, I don't want to see that. I'm not interested in that.
And it shouldn't go more than 10 seconds.
It makes no sense to me. But she's written Lindsay. I mean, she's written Lindsay Troy. Lindsay, first of all, is 6 foot tall and like 190 or something. I haven't.
She's more like Charlotte Flair size.
Yeah, and she's got a lot of submission stuff, which a strong woman puts you in an arm bar, you're probably going to have to tap if you don't want to have your arm broken.
Yep.
Or knee bar and whatever kind of lock that you're stuck in. Idea is not to get into it in the first place, right?
Listen, Ronda Rousey could kick my ass.
Yeah, for sure, without even skipping a beat, either of us. So I told her, look, and the other thing was, this is writing, it's a writing competition. This is a writing competition. This is kind of dumb for any of us to kind of hold on to that when you're talking about e-fedding. We're not talking
fantasy wrestling.
Fantasy wrestling. We're not talking about, we're not in an octagon here. Like we're not acting. Anyways, long story short, she came over. I said, it's going to be based on your writing. And so, I joke when I say like I gave her first like world championship, but what I did was I just gave her an opportunity to win it fairly. Like I just gave her an opportunity. That's all.
You just removed the bias.
And so when she won the world championship in EPW, that was for me like that was the moment where I was like, I almost like how it feels to see her so happy more than when I won it myself.
Nice. There you go.
So that's what I remember from that specifically, is that I remember her sending me a message after the results came out about how she like got tears in her eyes because she had been specifically told she would never win it by these guys who are just misogynist.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. And so when she said that, I'm like, okay, this is pretty fucking cool. I don't know. That feels pretty great. It felt great to me. I was like, I don't know if I have to write role plays anymore because this is cool. So if this is what it's like to like see someone this happy to win something in this kind of dumb hobby that we do, then I don't know if I have to handle anymore. That's how I felt at the time.
That's a great story. So that began your friendship with Linz, and talk about what happened after EPW closed.
So by the end of EPW, I was kind of starting. That was the next burnout, right? That was the fedhead burnout.
Okay.
after the
now you're done with the game.
I'm kind of just tired. I'm kind of tired. This is 2013, 14. So I'm like 29. I'm not that old or anything, but I'd been doing it for a long time. It felt like it, or like really kind of intensely, like in the middle of a lot of stuff. And I think that I was kind of done. I need something to change. I have this thing in my real life with like my real life job where I've always said, I'm going to give a job 5 years and then I'm going to kind of look at it in 5 years and I need something to be happening or I'm going to move on.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the same thing in the hobby. Something has to be happening or changing or moving forward or developing somehow, or I really want to move on. I feel a real pull to like move on. And so we had gotten into a routine, and it was a good routine. We were doing good shows, but they were starting to like come out a little slower. Right. So like, the next show would come out in 2 weeks instead of 1 week, and then 3 weeks later, and it started stretching out, right? And I could tell that I wasn't pulling these things together like I used to. And everybody takes my lead. So, other people were the same. Like, I'll have that match to you by Thursday, and it ends up being the following Wednesday. Or I started kind of feeling that, like that pull, like this has either got to change or we're just going to shut it down. And I thought it was just time to kind of pull it to a close gracefully
rather than sadly.
Yeah, rather than sadly. So we got to kind of a natural stopping point, and I just kind of let everybody know this is going to be it. And that was a pretty legit full blown retirement at that point when I shut it down.
So did you take a break?
So there was a break there, and there's no way I'm going to remember the years on this. So, but I was not a full-time handler from that point until Justin convinced me to join Defiance, which I apologize, but I really don't remember what year that was. It was like
it has to be late. It has to be between late 14 and early 15, I would think,
somewhere in there.
Because I came in after that.
So there was like maybe a 2 year break or a 1 or 2 year break somewhere in there. And maybe it wasn't as long as I think it was. Maybe it just kind of felt like it was.
Sure.
But I met Justin. This is Justin Taylor, of course, we're talking about.
Juice.
I met Justin. Yeah, Juice. I met Justin kind of behind the scenes. I think through the Ultra title tournament. I hope I'm not wrong on that. I think that's what he was on the circuit for. And I know he was in discussions about bringing Defiance to our forums at that time. I think, or maybe he competed in one of those things like Ultra title and I don't know, had a good time or whatever, and then later decided to bring it. But anyways, all that was kind of going on at the same time. I didn't know anything about Defiance. I didn't know Justin before that. I didn't know anything about it, which feeds in later into like the High Octane story later, which, they had their issues way before this, and I knew none of this. No idea what any of that was about. Anyways, I met Justin through that kind of. I actually met Justin because Justin, as fiery as he can be, as we all know, angry Justin, got into it with some people on the forums.
No.
By this time, having been an Efed on the circuit for so long, I was an admin on the forums also, right?
Okay.
So it was me and like Pete. Pete was an admin.
Yep.
Of course, Chad and Steve, because they co-founded CSWA, and I think one of the New Frontier guys, NFW guys, Katz may have been one, or Greg might have been one too. But anyway, so I met Justin because he got into it with some other people on the forum, and then Pete. my recollection is that Pete tried to intervene, and this was publicly on the forum, and that in not so many words, Justin told him to go F himself, kind of. And Pete's an admin, so Pete was like, I'm banning this guy. He's gone, right? This is behind the scenes. He's like, this guy's gone. And so Pete, he has to, he's not going to do that without consulting like other admins and stuff just because someone pisses him off. We kind of we talked to each other. I wasn't really involved, and so I had to go and look at it, and I have to admit, I kind of thought it was funny. I thought it was a little funny. I understood, like, you can't just, tell off an admin publicly like that. But I talked with Pete and Justin. I remember that we all kind of started talking about it, and I'd kind of helped to kind of talk Pete off the ledge a little bit, or at least agree not to ban Justin. And so that's how I got into contact with Justin the first time. And we just, we started talking. Long story short, eventually, he wanted me to come into Defiance, and Defiance was a role play fed at the time. I was like, okay, that's cool. And I joined Defiance, and then like really quickly he turned it into an angle fed. And I was like, oh, fuck you.
Now I'm stuck here. Yeah.
And I was up until that point pretty anti angle fed, or narrative fed as we called it back then. So I was never in any of the, I wasn't in FWO, or I wasn't in like Prime or any of that stuff. I think Prime actually might have been an RP fed, but I wasn't. I thought angle feds were dumb. I was like, well, I'll write 3 paragraphs about how my hair looks in the mirror today. That's kind of how I felt about it at the time. So, I mean, that's how I met Justin. That's how I got involved with Defiance, and so there you go.
And what do you think of Angle today?
So when he made the switch, kind of had to talk me into staying. I was like, dude, this is stupid. I don't want to do this. Because we had our tournaments, like I said, on the circuit, Ultra Title, some other things where we invited people from all over, right? We were like, we don't care what style you write. We don't care where you're from. We wanted that kind of variety, right? And so I would see some of the angle fed writing, trying to incorporate it into like role plays. And it was just like I said, there would be a guy standing there, and he's like, as I looked into the mirror and come into my hair, dude, I don't care.
The detail was extreme. Yeah.
I don't care about any of this. I kind of, up until that point, I kind of wrote like, almost like you would be like a journalist writing an article, where it's like, stick to the facts, stick to what's necessary, and don't talk about what's not necessary. It was very descriptive, like, I say descriptive, but I mean, like, I would write up until that point as though you were watching like a promo on TV, right? So you only describe what needs to be described to see the promo that you're trying to get across.
You're not going to describe the coat hook in the corner.
Sure, or how you feel about it.
Yeah.
which these are important things about writing and EFEDs, but I just didn't do.
You're talking about the long emotional role plays about your family and the baby and all this.
Right. What I'm talking about in a nutshell is character development.
Yes.
There wasn't a lot of that. There was a lot of talking trash. That was talking trash. I love talking trash. It's pretty good at talking trash. So that's what I did. I didn't do the other stuff because I didn't need to. I didn't think that I needed to, because I was winning plenty. I didn't see what do I need to do this for. I wasn't running into writers who did it in my circuit because they were all role play feds, right? So it wasn't a necessity. It wasn't a necessity at all, because I just didn't need it. So he had to kind of talk me into staying. He finally talked to me, and he was like, "It's really not that different. It's just like writing blah blah blah, whatever." He talked me into it, and I stayed, and I got to enjoy it more just because it pushed me to do something that I hadn't done before. So that was like at the time, an unexpected good side to it was I was able to find a challenge in it, so being bored by just trash talking all the time, and not winning all the time, but winning a lot, right? I'd gotten boring enough to burn me out before. And so I found a lot of challenge in writing that way. And I also, because I had been booking a fed for a while, obviously I enjoyed getting into like arcs with people and writing out stories, planning out stories. And I'd already been doing that with handlers and EPW. So I always liked that. I knew I liked that. It was good. Now, I didn't know any of this drama stuff that they were always involved with. Justin and Jeff Andrews and the guys that were like Justin's old school crew that was there when I first got there, who all were involved in all of that whatever with High Octane years and years before I had anything to do with Defiance. I didn't know anything about that stuff. What I did know when I got there, just based on my experience, is that I didn't really get along with any of those Defiance guys except for Justin. Because Justin, he can be an acquired taste for some people, and he can argue and he can rage at people, but he's also really smart.
Yep.
Justin is really smart. He knows wrestling.
He loves wrestling.
He loves wrestling, and he knows it. Yeah, he knows and loves wrestling. I could talk to him forever about wrestling. He's a Southern wrestling. Yeah, he's from the South. He grew up on a lot of the same Southern stuff that I did. Easy to talk to. Like I said, smart guy, super hot temper. Right? But we had enough in common, though, that, we became friends because he was reasonable. So he would pop off in anger or with a temper, but he could be talked to.
Justin and I became good friends because we got in a fight, and then I DM'd him and we talked about it and we figured it out.
Yeah, I think that's a common theme with him, actually, with his friends.
Yeah,
and it's actually, I don't mind that at all. I mind if you're an asshole, and there's a difference to me between an asshole and just someone who kind of wears their emotions on their sleeve, and I think he's that.
Yep.
I don't think. Here's what I know: like, Justin has always been a good friend to me. Like, there's never been a point where, like, I thought that he wasn't a good friend, which is bigger to me than any of that other stuff. And there's lots of people who are like, I can't. There were other friends of mine who didn't like him, thought he was a jerk or whatever, and I'm like, well, he's my friend, so I don't know what to tell you.
Take us somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just some people get along with people and some people don't. I don't know. What are you going to do?
We like the juice here on the Efed podcast.
Yeah. No, he's my friend. He's one of my best friends in the hobby. So, but anyway, so his crew, like Jeff was like his kind of I don't know, he was a co-founder. He was like in charge with him when I couldn't stand this dude. Like I shouldn't say I couldn't stand him. He was like one of these guys who to my perception, he was one of these guys who took out his lack of any sort of authority in the real world on people in the Efed world. To where, you know what I mean? So, like, he doesn't get to boss people around in real life, so he's going to boss people around on here.
Yeah, I gotcha. Fulfilling his fantasy in a different way.
Yeah, he was that kind of guy. And so there was, like, a crossroads where he and I kind of publicly got into it. And I don't know, I think another handler had something like they'd gotten real sick and no show to show or something, right? And, again, this is after this guy just kind of grated on my nerves a lot already anyway. But so this other guy kind of no showed, and he wrote kind of a post where he was like, I was really sick. I didn't feel well. I'm really sorry, blah, 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 blah. It was, kind of an apology. And who knows? Was he sick? I don't know, but it's not a big deal. So Jeff just kind of lays into him, like publicly lays into this guy about his full of shit where you weren't sick, blah, 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 all this stuff. And so I was just kind of done with him. And so I posted a response of my own calling Jeff out. And the way I look at things is like, I don't ever tell people like it's this person or me, like in an Efed situation, because it's really not like that serious. Efedding I don't really want Efedding to ever take up enough of my like ego that I would do something like that in a game. But what I will do is say, look, here's the deal. I don't like this guy, so I'm going to leave. Okay. I'm not telling you have to get rid of him. All I'm saying is I can't deal with this guy. I can't deal with this guy anymore. I'm gone. Right. So this has happened a few times, and both times this has happened, the fedhead came back and said, whoa. No, just wait a second. And it's worked out for me to stay. In this particular instance, Justin, who's really close with Jeff, I mean, Jeff was just not able to keep himself from going too far with his attitude. And I was like, I'm not going to say another word to him. I'm just telling you, I'm probably going to go because I'm tired of him and I don't need it. I don't need to do this. And ultimately, I'm not, Justin wasn't like it wasn't a taking my side thing. It was just more of a, like, his eyes opened, because I think Jeff was always like this. And Justin was just like, you know what? He's running people off. And it really wasn't just me. I shouldn't make it sound like it was just me versus Jeff, because there were other people that were just, not having it with him. And then Jeff was gone, and that's, Justin was all it was. He was in charge, just him from then on.
And handling under Justin, you didn't have those issues any longer.
I never had any issue with Justin, handler to fedhead. Justin, another good thing about Justin is that he will be very honest with you, very brutally honest with you. If you give him an idea and he thinks it sucks, he'll tell you it sucks. But I see that works great with me, because that's exactly how I always want it to be. I find no value in having my ass kissed or just saying, oh, that was great. That's great. That's just so good. I mean, it's nice for people to say that they like something. And I do like to hear, like, if you like something, that's great. But I find a lot of value in what you don't like, because I want to know what my audience thinks about it, or what the audience thinks about it, what's working, what's not working. Every different Fed that I've ever been in, they have their own culture when you come in, right? And I can't stand when you get the guys who come into a Fed and they're like, oh, I'm a big deal. I'm a big deal. And you guys may think this is a big deal now, but I'm here now, right? It's the most standard, basic, lazy thing that anybody can write, right? So, and we see it all the time, right? You see that guy all the time. But every Fed has a culture. And so to me, there's a challenge and there's some fun in figuring out the culture of a Fed, figuring out what works with that audience, figuring out what they like, what they don't like, and adapting it into your own style. So figuring out what do I have to do to succeed here as opposed to the place before. Because when I was at my best and I would go into these other Feds, the first thing I would always hear is, okay, yeah, you're a big deal there, but this is, it's the other side of that, right?
Well, that was there. This is here.
Yeah, and I was like, well, I'm not trying to bank on that anyway. You have to prove yourself all over again. But with Justin, he would just tell me straight up, well, that's stupid, or yeah, you're on the right track or whatever. It was really easy for me to deal with Justin as a handler when he was running the Fed.
And then at some point, somehow, some way, you ended up running the Fed of Defiance.
Okay, so there was a little staff put together towards the end of Justin's tenure. It was, Justin had the book, and then I was one of his, I guess, VPs, for lack of a better word. It was just like a staff. We didn't really have titles or anything. I was in there, and Murr was in there. And then I want to say Pete was in there. I'm probably leaving somebody out. There were 4 or 5 of us in there. Evan, that's right. Evan Hurley was in there. So there came the point where Justin was having his burnout, and he was like, I got to go. If we want the Fed to keep going, somebody's got to run it. And everybody just nominated me. You guys got to be kidding me with this. I didn't want to do it, but also I didn't want the Fed to die either. So I was like, here's the thing. This is an angle Fed, and I'm not writing any more than I already am writing. I'm not going to do it. And I'll stop. I was like, I'll stop handling, Dan Ryan in the Fed, because I'm not really big. I don't like running a character in a Fed that you got the book on. I don't like that at all. I said, I'll stop handling him. I guess I'll be if you guys want me to be the final booking say on titles and stuff. Because I mean, the good thing about Angle Feds, as you know, is quite a bit of the booking work is done by the handlers already. If they're doing their jobs, they're booking their own finishes in a lot of cases, right? So unless a championship is involved or something is messing with a larger angle, as a fed head, it's not as work intensive as if you are like in a role play fed and you have to physically write the entire show.
It makes sense. Brian says all the time about Defiance today is it basically runs itself.
Yeah. So I saw that, you know, I could probably do this. I can be like kind of a steady hand, like booker here. And we still have the staff. We still had, like you said, Evan, we had Murr, we had Pete. I think Lindsay was maybe in there. No, Lindsay wasn't in there yet. She wasn't in there. She came into the staff later. Because I think Lindsay won the championship. Like, I think that the booking was the way that we booked me into being the booker, you know, out around, you know, in kayfabe terms was the match where she beat me for the champion, for the fist. She beat me for the fist. That was the match where she tore all the ligaments in Dan Ryan's knee and she retired him basically.
Or was the thought? Yeah.
That was the thought. For all intents and purposes, he was meant to retire at that point, right? It was supposed to be the kind of a permanent injury. And so that's how I got in charge of it.
So you ran Defiance for a while. Eventually you also got the burnout or wanted to do something else.
I think I want to say that we all kind of were.
Yeah. The talk was Defiance was just going to shut down.
Yeah. So we had, you know, I think Murr burned out Evan kind of slowly faded out. He didn't have like a I'm leaving moment. He just kind of slowly stopped being there more and more. So Evan kind of faded out. I remember Murr, and I joke with Murr about this sometimes. Murr started to get just like kind of surface difficult, like not really difficult, but like what he would do, that's kind of funny, is he would say like, oh, well, look, I just really don't like whatever this thing is, this whatever, and that's just random issue. I really don't like how this has gone, and I would say, okay, well, and I would have like a solution for it, and so I'd have some sort of solution. It usually had something to do with how arcs were getting created, how the documents were being managed, or they, you know, there was someone who was making sure they were following up or keeping things organized, right? It was something like that, and I would say, okay, well, in that case, let's do it like this. And this will fix that problem. And so I would he would give me like a problem that he kind of hoped that I wouldn't know how to solve. Kind of hoping that I would be like, oh, well, I guess we just need to stop. But then I would come up with like a solution. He'd be like, and so then he'd come up with like another one. And but it was always like really surface, not serious stuff. And so I remember one time, you know, we were talking. And I said, hey, you know, man, I think you're just maybe done. I think maybe you're just burned out, but you don't want to say it because, I don't know, you don't want to let me down or something. And he was like, yeah, 100%. That's exactly what it is. And so he burned out, and he was there for the invasion angle, the invasion angle. That was all happening around that time. You got into the staff chats and stuff too, right? Around that time.
Yeah. And that's how I kind of had intricate knowledge of kind of who was leaving.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was going to have like one, like big, like blow off goodbye show for the Fed. Cause there wasn't an obvious person to take it over. No one in staff wanted to take it over.
Yeah.
Evan wasn't going to do it. Murr wasn't going to do it. Justin wasn't coming back. Lindsay wasn't going to do it. And I was done. I was like, okay, so if this is how it is, then we need to have like one big show. This is a Fed that's been around for years and years and years. There should at least be one like goodbye show or something. And so I remember, I think I did a post about it. I was like, you know, guys, we're going to do this. I was going to reach out to I even was going to reach out to Jeff, you know, who I was talking about before, about, hey man, I know, you know, we don't get along, but you were like a co-founder or a big part of the early years of it. Maybe you should just show up. And he was going to be one of the guys that just showed up on stage, like at the end of the show or something, the crowd cheers and all that stuff. And so it was from that forum post, I think, that Brian goes, I'll do it if you want. And I was like, really? Like, I had no clue he had any interest at all, because he was in the Fed, but I don't think that he had ever like expressed that kind of an interest.
He was even in the staff chat at the time, and his job is what we call the roll-in job now, is that he would just move things around backstage for people. That's right. He didn't do anything other than just like clerical work.
That's right. And I just didn't know he was interested. But when he showed interest, I go, well, hell yeah, man, if you want to do it, by all means. I mean, if people still want to write and you want to do it, then take it over. I'm not like hell bent on shutting the place down or anything.
And he got with Tom Ford and Seth.
Yeah,
Seth, and the two of them, or the three of them, kind of kept things on their feet.
They kept it going, and I went into retirement number 3.
And then that retirement ended, and you ended up in High Octane Wrestling.
Well, what happened was I got like a role play itch, I guess. Which by this point I hadn't done role play consistently since, like, full time since before Empire Pro, if you think about it. So we're talking about 2004, 5, 6, that area.
So well over 10 years.
Yeah, well over 10 years. I hadn't just done like role play or like trash talk. And, you do promos and things in angle feds, of course, right? But just like straightforward, just lay into each other trash talk, which is just fun.
It's completely different, yeah.
It's really fun. Now, you have to be a specific kind of person to do that, because you have to be able to take it, right? So if you can't take it, you really shouldn't do it. But I love doing it, and I love people hit me back too. Like a lot of the people that I became friends with were people that I got into matches with, and I would get really into this trash talk and like going hard at each other. And after the thing, going like, man, that was pretty funny, or that was good. That was, was great.
Here's the thing. Why can't you take it? It's a character. Don't take everything personally. My God.
Well, I know, but it wasn't always. I mean, I say it wasn't always like that. I don't know that it's still always like that. Like, I don't know if it's I just think that there are a lot of insecurities and self-esteem based things that some of us get into this hobby because of in the first place. You know what I mean? So like, it's an escape. Like there are a lot of e-fedders where
this is like, the only confidence they have. Yeah.
Sure. So if you feel that way and you're writing this character and someone comes really hard at you, and even if you know it's a character, I think sometimes a person like that just instinctively in their gut just feels it, right? So like, they're used to this crap in the real world. I don't need this crap here too. And so, they lash out, and it's not friendly, and it's not great. But I love it. I love it. Most of my better friends, any of you guys who I'm friends with, are people who I've had at least some kind of trash talk exchange with. I mean, because that's like my language. I don't know. I feel like I get closer to friends by just kind of ribbing each other, and and also, in my regular, normal everyday life, I was a basketball player coming up, like in high school and stuff, and that's all we did on the court.
Talk shit.
It's just talk shit. That's all we did. It's just fun. It's just part of it.
As a heel character, I love when someone I'm facing gets a great fucking zing on me, because I laugh so hard. Like, damn, no one's ever hit me like that.
Yeah, you're one of the easier ones, because I know right away that you'll laugh like right away. If I say something, or if you say something, I'll send you a message and just laugh about it. But so anyway, so I got that itch, that kind of role play itch, and I thought, I didn't really even know like what was out there anymore. Defiance was angle fed. I didn't really know any, what the state of role play feds really were, and I think Justin told me about CWF. which is Justin Rischel's Fed.
Yes, yes.
I think
bunch
Justin
of people showed up real quick.
Yeah, so Justin, I think, was there, and he was like, "Well, if you want to do role plays again or just trash talk," he's like, it was kind of low key. It wasn't a super serious, like there wasn't like a lot of, there wasn't like a real intense kind of Fed. They had their own group, and it was role play. But then I talked to this other guy, Justin Rischel, and we talked a little bit, and then by the time I agreed to come in, I think Justin left. I got mad or something, which just surprised you, I'm sure. So he left, and I went in there, and it was fine for a while. For a while, it was fine. It wasn't nice people. I didn't have any problems with any of the people. I wrote and did my little shtick and trash talk and won a few things here and there. And I think that I was like, I was still friends with Lindsay and stuff, and I would talk to her, and I just kind of casually mentioned that I was doing it again, and she's like, "Oh, you're doing that again?" Because she was retired too. She was very retired. He's like, "You're doing that stuff again?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I guess." And so I would do like I do to any of my friends. Sometimes I've done this to you before too, where I just kind of paste a little segment of something I'm writing that I think is maybe funny, or I just kind of want to know if it's as funny as I think it is sometimes. Sometimes I just amuse myself, and sometimes it's actually really funny. So I started kind of pasting her stuff, and I guess she got the bug too, and she went in there, and that's how I got back into it. And I think that, then Justin got to talking to Mike again, and, they had an on and off kind of love-hate relationship for years and years and years, going back to the HOW and Defiance drama that was before me. But at this point, they got to talking again. I think they were friends again, and he started talking, Justin started talking to Lee, and they were getting along, and they got around to coming in and talking about this Best Alliance angle, which, there's been many versions of the Best Alliance, but this one was going to be for that first War Games that I was here for. And Justin was trying to get people together to do it, and he got Ford to do it, and Ford came later. He got Pete to do it, and then he kind of talked me into doing it, and I was a little ambivalent about it. I was just kind of like, I guess I'll do it. Like, I guess. Because I didn't know any of this drama stuff really, except for what Justin had told me. So I didn't have any like emotional, like, oh yeah, let's go beat HOW like he did. He definitely did. He
goes really, in like, oh, I'm going to wipe the floor with everybody.
Oh yeah. He wanted to go in and really, make a statement. So he was kind of trying to pull together his friends who he thought were, would be really good to go in and give him like the best chance of bringing like a crew, right? Basically. And, he got me to come in, and then I was able to convince Lindsay to come in, which wasn't actually an easy sell because her and Justin were not getting along, had not gotten along for a long time. They had problems at the end of Defiance too. But she decided to come in, and I think that last domino was Ford, and I think Lee was interested in Ford. I think he knew Ford through maybe some angle fed stuff back in the day, like way back or something. Ford's got a name in circuits that don't know anything about me. You know what I mean?
Oh, you wouldn't believe how far back High Flyer has a reputation.
For sure. And that's funny about Ford because when we got into HOW, that was kind of the first time, even though I'd been around Ford for years on the FWC circuit, like in all the roleplay feds and stuff. Tom had loads of success in angle feds, right? And like other angle fed circuits and stuff that I knew had happened, but I'd never really read because, again, I was very anti-angle feds for a long time.
Sure.
So I first started really working with Ford during that Best Alliance angle for the first time, even though I'd known him forever. And I had no idea how insane he is. Like he's really kind of nuts. I was like, and I told him, I said, dude, you're kind of a weird dude, right? You're like really kind of nuts. Like I always knew Ford as, good, like a good role player and stuff, but I don't think like role play is not his like best side as far as e-fetting goes. I think he's a really good angle fedder.
Oh, he's so good. Yeah.
And so like, I was like, dude, you're like, I meant it as a compliment. For life, by the way, we would try to write segments and stuff, and he would just start writing some stuff. I'm like, what is this?
Where is this going?
Where is this going? So he was a weird dude, but I don't know. So that's how that whole thing started. And I didn't really have like an emotional tie to this idea of coming in and let's get HOW. But I was also I was with Justin. So I was whether I liked it or not, So.
And you've been there now for what, 2 years?
It's been 2 years, I guess. Yeah. So, 2 war games. It was before not this most recent war games, but the one before. It was right
almost 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Well, that's awesome. How has your experience in high octane wrestling been?
I mean, like any place, you have to, like I was saying before, you have to kind of figure out the culture of a place. There's always one thing that was kind of cool about it is that not too many people in high octane actually knew much about me at all, which I really kind of liked, because one of the things that I got kind of tired of was having to try to like live up to whatever that name was that got around, you know what I mean? So I kind of liked the fact that they didn't really know anything about me. So I thought, okay, so I can kind of make a name for myself based on this place and not based on the older place. But then there were some people who did, like Colin, who I've known forever, was there. I was like, oh, Colin, that's awesome, because I didn't even realize Colin was writing still before HOW. And I only kind of sort of knew Mike, but I didn't know really anybody. So I've liked the process of figuring a place out and figuring out what works, what doesn't work,
what the fedhead likes,
what all the other handlers who have been there forever. Like, when a place has been around for so long, as there's like an ingrained like core, and there's like a culture, and to break into that is not necessarily easy,
Absolutely. So, you got to get used to the politics of any fed.
Sure. So now I feel, really, really at home in it. I'm very comfortable in it, but it was a little bit of a process, but most of that was just because I think that coming in, I had some like lazy habits, just from not doing things in so long, or not being pushed in so long to not be lazy. It's like just kind of roll the ball out there and win or whatever in some places. But there's lots of really good writing in HOW. You can't slack. You can't slack in that fed.
Not at all. Not even 1 week. When we jumped in earlier this year, the talent level on that roster was insane.
Yeah, there are a few feds that I've been through probably in my entire time in the hobby with as much overall talent, like across the board, where you have like, main event level people not in the main event, or not even really a chance to be in the main event, because there are so many people, that can do the same thing.
It's everybody comes together and they're on the same card, and there's big matches all the way up and down it. But it's crazy. Well, that pretty much covers it. Did we miss anything?
Only the things that I just didn't mention, because it was just way too much.
We've already hit an hour and a half.
Yeah, it's like 20 years of stuff, and there's loads of minutia that we don't need to get into.
Very good. Well, let's go ahead and get into the Twitter and Discord questions.
All right.
Up first on the Twitter side of things, we've got Ruzilla. At what age does a boy's period start?
Yeah, man, I don't know. I guess I'll let you know when I get one.
At Only Star DEF, how did we never have a match?
I mean, I don't know. Either he was, most of our time together was in Defiance. He was booking me, or I was booking and he was retired. So that's Justin. It's Eric Dane.
But it's not out of the picture yet. You're both in High Octane.
That's right. It's not out of the picture. We're in HOW now. It could still happen. We're not teaming now or anything. So that's not out of the question.
At Psycho Rasian, what do you feel like was the driving force in creating your character? Did you know where you were going with him in the beginning?
So, no, I mentioned before, and I had no idea where I was going with him. I didn't even think past what I was doing at the time. I was just talking trash and just kind of having fun with that. The driving force in creating the character again, I took characteristics of wrestling and wrestlers that I liked at the time. And just the attitude that was like, I mean, he's always kind of had all of the characteristics that I would never want to have, sort of. Like, I don't want, he's kind of like my worst emotions or instincts kind of dialed up, you know?
The dark side.
Yeah, pretty much.
Very good. We got User Poets up next. Pete, if you had to rank the greatest EPW world champions, who would be higher? Triple X or the first, and why?
So, no offense to Mike Stanton, who is the first handler, but I don't think this is really much of a comparison. I think it's Triple X Sean Stevens, and that's Jamar Short's character. He was EPW world champion for about 2 years. Triple X on that question.
He's your guy, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Why did you make us have to forever put former world champion after Cameron Cruz's name?
Okay, Cameron Cruz. So Tom Siegel's the handler, Cameron Cruz, and Tom Siegel is not what you would call world champion material exactly, but Tom was in EPW for its entire 10-year run. He is a very loyal handler. He didn't miss shows. He always contributed. Every Fed has like one of these backbone guys.
Ron Hall.
Yeah, he was that guy. And right there at the end of the run, I did give him a cup of coffee with the World Championship as like a thank you.
Nice.
That's why.
How tempted were you to get all BDSM with Cruz and Jared Wells?
The answer is not at all. Not at all.
That's fairly easy.
Yeah, I mean, no. Mm-mm.
All right, well, we're going to switch it up and go to the Discord side of things. Well, we got a lot of questions.
Yep.
From Ross, what aspect of RP feds do you like that aren't in angle feds and vice versa?
Okay, so what do I like about roleplay feds? It's the competitive nature.
Yes.
So the competition, obviously, if you want to challenge and test yourself against other people who do the same thing, roleplay feds are obviously the place to be. That's what I love now. It's fun to get matched up with really good writers and see how you stack up and see what other people think about how you stack up. For roleplay feds now with angle feds, and I know that there are people who are kind of get caught on this also. The collaboration probably is the best part if you're more of a storyteller. Now, you can do your storytelling in roleplay feds, but it's a lot more of telling your story, whereas with angle feds, you have a big hand in telling larger stories that can intertwine with other stories. I mean, sometimes you can have 4, 5, 6 characters involved with, intricate stories. And if you're good at it, then, it all weaves in and out of each other and makes sense. And it's really good storytelling, right? Where, competition is taken out of the picture because you're not being judged on, single role plays or, talking trash. You're going to get judged on your work output, your overall work quality, your participation, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a whole different game. Okay, up next we got Tom Ford. I wear a box on my head. If Dan Ryan's entire backyard is Texas, then why did his backyard vote for Bob Dole for president in '96?
Yeah, that's a really weird question.
Was it because of New Pepsi?
That makes it weirder. Again, I said Ford is a really weird dude that I didn't realize until recently. Dan Ryan was not particularly famous or have much money in 1996, so I don't think you can blame him for that. I don't think Texas was his backyard at that time.
Damn. And here we are on election night even.
I know.
All right, serious question from I Wear a Box on My Head. Do you ever miss running EPW, and who's the handler you miss partaking in this hobby the most?
I do. I miss a lot of the people, and I miss some of those things, crafting stories with people and booking out angles and just seeing people be happy or enjoy things that we put out, getting that sort of feedback that, that would come after a show. I miss a lot of that. I don't miss the work that it takes to run an Efed well. I don't miss that, which is why I'm not doing it anymore. The handler I miss most, there are probably a couple. I'll say that I miss, do you know Paul Brisman?
Yeah,
you're gonna have him
absolutely.
On the show too, right?
He's going to be on the show too.
I miss the hell out of Paul. Paul's really funny and smart and was really good at this. And he just stopped doing it, just decided he didn't want to do it anymore and just kind of stopped. I miss him doing it. So that'll be my answer there, Paul.
Nice. Hi, Paul.
Mm.
Up next, we got MDG Warren. What's the worst storyline you ever remember being a part of? It's your wall of shame.
Okay. The worst storyline that my character was involved in was completely without my input. There was... this is convoluted, but this was in New Frontier Wrestling, which I didn't really get to earlier when we were talking about the other stuff. But New Frontier, there was an angle where I had a match, and during the match, they had Dan Ryan down on the outside, and they had a character who happened to be gay, put chocolate sauce on him, and then licked it off of him. I had no knowledge of this even happening, or I didn't know it was coming, or I didn't mean to say coming just now. I had no idea that I was going to be on the show. I thought it was stupid and just dumb. I just thought it was kind of sort of an embarrassing angle. I didn't like it very much. It was silly.
Did the play-by-mail Fed you were in prepare you for E-Feds today? How or why not?
I don't know that it really did. I don't think that it really did, because there weren't a lot of transferable skills from just picking numbers. You had to kind of predict patterns in the numbers and stuff, but that's not, no, I don't really think so.
Just your introduction.
Yeah, it's just how I got my foot in.
From Seth is Burns. As a man of many hats, from fed heading to handling in angle and RP feds, which parts have been the easiest and most difficult, and why?
Oh boy, that's a question. Let's see. So the most natural, if we're going to talk about the easiest, the most natural thing has always been the shit talk, the trash talk. That's the most natural. That doesn't mean I guess it's not really easy, because there was definitely a time where, I can look back at some really terrible trash talk that I wrote, compared to what I consider to be good today. That was probably the most natural. The most difficult has always been, or has, I would say, most challenging thing, just been fleshing out the descriptive nature of role plays. Once it became obvious that I needed to learn how to do that well to get points in certain feds, but also just to be a better writer. And I actually enjoy just writing in general. So if you're going to be telling a story or setting scenes, if you think about it, you have to work it actually takes work to get better at that. It's not just a matter of, oh, well, just write this or just write that. No, you have to, you should do a lot of reading of literature, different types of literature. You should be paying attention to things other than wrestling if you want to be better at having fully fleshed out characters and worlds and things that matter once you're going up against the really talented writers in this game, I think.
It's a good it's a good answer. The hardest part sometimes are just doing things that don't come natural to you, like you said in the beginning.
Yeah.
All right, up next is Megan, 5BW owner. Brunk, what's better, chicken noodle soup or tomato soup? People want to know.
I guess. Well, she does anyway. So I used to eat, like, my mom used to do like tomato soup with like grilled cheese sandwiches when I was a kid. And those are pretty freaking good. I don't eat soup of any kind unless I'm maybe sick or something.
Same. Thank you. No one wants wet food. I am on that.
A couple of things is like, to me, I associate it with being sick, because I would be home from school sick and my mom would make soup, right? And the other thing is I don't understand ordering soup in a restaurant. That just doesn't make any sense to me. That's weird. I don't like ordering things in restaurants that I can make at home. Like I don't generally order sandwiches at a restaurant to sit down and order a sandwich that I can make at home. No. So, okay. I mean, my answer is equally ridiculous. They're both equally ridiculous. That's my answer.
There you go. No one likes soup. What's your thoughts on the Efed scene today?
I would have to say that my understanding of the Efed scene is entirely centered on high octane. I don't pay attention to anything else.
I don't think high octane pays attention to anything else.
I have a small interest in what's going on with Defiance, just because I have so many friends there. So I kind of chit chat occasionally with a few people and kind of ask how it's going or whatever. But outside of that, I just don't pay attention to it. There was a little bit of time there when I first came to High Octane, and kind of just for shits and giggles got involved with just talking trash on Twitter. But it's such like because that's again, I go back to like, I do that just like totally just for fun. And if someone hit me back with something good, I mean, I would love it. Right. But almost everyone on Twitter takes it way too seriously. Like,
I enjoyed jabbing with you during our little Halloween.
Sure. To me, that kind of stuff with someone who I know is going to take it and who's going to fire back, like, you and Murr and even Jay and all you guys. I mean, it's fine, because I know that, like, if you say something funny, I can, private message you that has, pretty good or whatever. Hit you back with something. But the vast majority of people on Twitter, in my experience, take it way too seriously. So I mostly abandoned that. I really don't pay attention to any other feds anymore.
Toughest opponent overall?
Well, there's only been, I'm still doing this, and there's still people that I haven't beat that I'm actively writing with now. I had like 4 matches with Colin last year, and like 3 of them were draws. So he should probably be right up there at the near the top of the list. And I've had one match with Mike, although I'm about to have another one with Mike. I haven't Mike Best, right? I haven't beaten Mike yet. I said yet. That's gonna be some ammo in our role play. There's been a couple. There was a guy, Nova, back in NFW, Chris. I don't remember his last name. Chris. His character was Nova. I had like 3 matches with him and never could beat him. So those are 3 good ones that just come right to the top of my head.
At Capacity, what's one thing you wish you knew when you were just starting out?
One thing I wish I knew. I would say probably. Well, I wish I could just tell myself to be better, because it was bad. It was really bad. It was just bad trash talk. Probably the most important thing that I think anybody should should do is a little bit of what I touched on before about making sure that your actual self-esteem is not wrapped up in the self-esteem of how you do in this game. You know, if you don't get very, very angry when you play like a game of Monopoly, you should not get angry playing this game either, because it's the same thing.
You better not build that hotel, Brunk.
Yeah, swear to God. Swear to God. No, it's
I will throw this board across the room.
I just nothing kind of derails someone more than when they get kind of wrapped up in that, or put too many of their own characteristics into their Efed character, because I think what you're doing is you're setting yourself up for failure there. Because inevitably, if you're just writing yourself as a character, well, someone's going to insult you, and you're going to be insulted because it's you. It's you, basically. So,
yeah. So don't name your character after yourself.
Yeah, stupid. Andy Murray, stupid. Well, there you go.
Okay, back to Warren. What one defeat stung the worst?
So there's one kind of notorious one, and only probably Lindsay will even know what this is. And I saw the name on her list for later also, and it's this character named Duchess, which is, she was like a 5'1", 125-pound character in A1 Wrestling. And A1 Wrestling had this terrible booking system where every handler in the Fed voted for who would win the match. That's how they booked. Okay, so
popularity contest.
So this was like maybe my first match there. The handler, not good, not a good writer. I don't think most people even read the role plays. There's just, I'm pretty. I will kind of default to being a little self-deprecating most of the time. Like, I'm not ever going to talk myself up, but it was terrible. Hers was terrible, like absolutely terrible. And they voted her to win that match. And I was like, you know what? This is the dumbest thing. And it was like this little 5 foot, 100-and-nothing-pound character did like a moonsault onto 300-pound, 6'7" Dan Ryan, and he was pinned with it. It was the dumbest thing I ever saw. And there you go. That's my answer.
At Zumi, pineapple on pizza or no?
Mm-mm.
Never. All right. Strap in for this one. At E-Wrestling Sweetest Boy.
Yeah.
His hobby has a lot of talented RPers who seem to either excel in the trash talk component, the character development component, or being able to be vivid and artistic in their scene setting. You are one of the few I've read who's top tier in all three. What's your favorite to do?
Well, it's a nice compliment, I guess. Well, trash talk, obviously.
We both played in the IWA play-by-mail game. One of their incentives for being good was to offer prizes, an actual championship belt that was really shitty and low quality, but for its time, as a kid, it would have been cool to win. Do you think the offer of prizes, obviously not ones as awful as IWA offered, would be something that might generate new blood into the hobby or motivate people to boost their best foot forward for writing?
Well, a couple of things. Yeah, he's right. They were really shitty and low quality. They seemed really super cool when I was 14, getting a championship belt. Like, again, before the internet and you just see wrestling on TV, I can win a championship belt. This is badass. Okay. It wasn't badass. He's right. It was shitty and low quality. And I think there have been a few feds that have done the offer of prizes, right? I mean, I want to say, maybe Halcom did one. Did he do that? I thought he offered some prizes or something.
I don't know if he had prizes, but what he would do is he had items like you could buy trading cards of your characters. Right. He just had a lot of extras that they could produce.
Don't think that those things would motivate me. I think it's maybe gimmicky and kind of goofy. It might motivate some people. I think what generates new blood in the hobby is wrestling being popular or not, real world wrestling being popular. We had a huge boom during and after the Attitude Era. That was like my kind of prime era. All those people, like there were so many e-fedders around because wrestling was hot. As wrestling goes, as real wrestling goes, the hobby tends to go. Now that's what generates new blood in the hobby.
I tend to agree with you.
Yeah.
The IWA and a lot of feds back in the day were built around an umbrella, kind of like territories were all part of the NWA. They all had one world champion and would mosey around and defend the title in other feds. The IWA wasn't really like this, but similar concept. Do you think that this would be a concept that could be possible in today's game?
I mean, if somebody wanted to organize something like that, you could do it, I suppose. It takes a lot of organization. It takes different feds, one being willing to be under an umbrella. A lot of feds are like, I'm not going to kind of give away my level of, what we consider ourselves like a world championship. I'm not going to give that away to like an umbrella. There's been some of those. There was WFWA. There's been a couple. There were others. I know I'm forgetting some, but I don't know. I mean, it would just take someone to want to do it for enough feds to want to be involved. It's a big undertaking. So, if someone wants to try, go ahead. But I think the fact that it's not happening probably is the answer to that question.
There you go. Up next is Cool Olympus. Are you still the CSWA World Heavyweight Champion?
Technically, yes. I think I am. I was the last CSWA World Heavyweight Champion, so I guess that's a yes. 10, 15 years and going now, I guess. Long
Man, you got to defend that sometime.
Bruno Sammartino.
Style run, that's right. Well, see, as I pass your Defiance run, you can toast to that.
All right. Let's do it.
All right. I had to sneak that in somewhere. Up next is Jason Reeves, the Stalker. Could you please elaborate further on why EPW was the greatest event ever?
Well, I know that he feels that way. He said it to me a couple of times, and it's nice. It's nice to hear. I mean, I had a lot of fun doing EPW, so I mean that's just nice of him to say.
If you were to return to Defiance, who would be the first person to work with?
Well, I think there's lots of people there that I haven't ever worked with. I'm pretty sure. I couldn't say off the top of my head the entire roster anymore. I know you guys are there. You and Murr and you guys. 24K are still there, which I have worked with all of you, obviously. There's lots of people on that roster that I'm open to working with pretty much anyone. I wouldn't, cross anyone off the list of wanting to work with them.
Except for Stalker.
Oh yeah, he's ridiculous. Just forget him. Enough with that guy already.
All right. What's your favorite finishing move in wrestling? Good question.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. I like, as far as like power, big guy moves go, I always like the tombstone a lot. That's a pretty devastating and final move in most cases, unless you get to the really overbooked last matches where people are kicking out of 3 of them. And for like sudden out of nowhere moves, I always like, Sean's super kick. So
there you have it. Can I have your son's autograph when he becomes a famous pitching star?
Well, that's like 1 in a billion. Probably not going to happen, but if it does, then sure, why not?
Well, he may have the rookie autograph.
Well, there you go. So. There you go.
Do you game at all? Xbox, PlayStation, whatever?
No, not anymore. I don't. I did when I was younger, and I just kind of slowly lost interest. I haven't consistently gamed since like PS2 or something. All my kids do.
Getting old, Brunk.
Yeah, I'm getting old, man. I just aged out.
How many times did you want to fire Stalker from EPW?
I don't know if I ever wanted to fire him. I kind of think maybe I should have, though. Sounds like I should have.
All right. Up next, we've got Highlander 4H, Ron Hall McDonald. Yeah. Favorite accomplishment in the hobby?
Okay, so that...
Is it fedheading or is it CSWA?
I was going to say it's probably that CSWA championship win, probably. That's probably the most impactful one. So I think probably as a handler, that's probably the most important one of them. As a handler, as a fedhead, probably that Lindsay win. That was the most gratifying, I think.
Nice. EPW championship. Best advice you'd give to a brand new handler?
I feel like I answered this one on the other one, didn't I? I really just think you have to have some perspective on what you're doing here, what you're doing it for, what you're trying to get out of it.
Separate character from reality.
Separate character from reality. And kind of another thing I would say, just to kind of, so I don't repeat myself, is I would say that especially if you're, let's say, in an angle fed, that it's important to have all kinds of people in a fed like that. I know, like in Defiance, for example, it's very, very important to have people up and down the card that you can depend on and that fill a role on a show. This doesn't really apply so much in a role play fed where you are just strictly competing, but you need all kinds of people and you want to have a fully well-rounded place, and don't feel like if you're not on top that it's not worth doing, or that, don't ever let yourself think that a spot is beneath you. And if you do think it's beneath you, keep that to yourself and just prove that you should be higher without being a dick about it.
That's awesome advice. Yeah. I love that. It's outshine your spot. And that's how you. Yeah, I relate this
as far as like in my personal life. This is something like with my son we talked about. He plays baseball, and I always tried to make sure, since he started as you're going to either be part of teams or new teams or situations they may not know you, or they may not think you're good enough. They're going to stick you out in right field. Like, well, be the best right fielder. Be the best right fielder you can be. That they're gonna say, well, maybe he can go do something else. Maybe he can do better. Maybe he deserves more responsibility. And that's how the real world works. You don't mostly you don't get ahead by bitching and moaning. That's not how it works. So
good. And lastly, from Ron, does Mikey have incriminating photos of you, and is that how he got you on the show?
Not that I'm aware of. Actually, I think you just added me to the list without asking.
Pretty much.
So,
all right, now I would throw my friends on the list. So here we go. Okay. Up next,
I didn't say no either. So
no, of course not. Up next is Mikey Unlikely. What fed that you were in didn't get the recognition it deserved?
Let's see. Didn't get the recognition it deserved. Well, I was in
GXW.
I think GXW got recognition at its time. I would say I was in a place called New Alberta Professional Wrestling, which was completely off the FWC circuit. It was on its own little set of forums. They ran it as like a regional promotion in Alberta, Canada.
Okay.
Right. It was just fun. I just had a lot of fun there. There were some there were some really good riders there. I had a lot of fun there, and it was I did well there with Dan Ryan, but also it was, I think, the only place that I won a world championship with a different character other than Dan Ryan. So it was just fun. I thought it was a really good fed, and they did participate some in some of the FWC stuff, like the tournaments, the intra-fed tournaments too. So they got a little recognition, but they probably could have used a little more.
What's the biggest shit show fed you've been a part of?
So the last years of New Frontier Wrestling were just a disaster. I thought they were probably running neck and neck. Well, they were running neck and neck with us and Empire Pro as like the top feds on the circuit at that time. And then towards the end, there was a moment where they had their own war game show. And remember, this is a role play fed as far as we knew. This is a role, you role play and you win based on role plays. And we had a match here where it was like 4-on-4 war games. I think there was four on the side I was on. There was 4 on the side the other side. The other side, I think 2 of the 4 didn't. It was a max out of 3, and they didn't max out. 3 members of my team didn't max out. I did max out, and one of the guys on the other side maxed out. And the finish of the match was my character like put in a figure 4, and then a surprise character came out and just bashed him with a chair until he had to submit. But they just angled it. They kind of what we used to call God booked it.
Yeah,
that's what we used to call it in roleplay feds. And they just God booked it without making us think that we were role playing to win when we really weren't. We wrote like these huge, like 10,000 word
three role plays, yeah,
3 of them, and then it didn't matter because they just booked what they wanted to.
Jeez.
And then I had to sell because it was for like I don't remember exactly, but the angle was something about the winning side. There was like an East and West like conference thing. It was like kind of like a sports setup. Like there was like an Eastern Conference, a Western Conference thing. Well, the winning side was going to win like control of the Fed for a year or something. I don't remember. Try to block a lot of that in my head. But I had to sell in kayfabe that I was the reason that our side lost because of this finish. When I was like the only one on my side that maxed out and wrote. And so then the fedhead's like, oh, that's just a story. It doesn't matter. I was like, dude, I'm the one who has to deal with this for the next year. It was really irritating. And it was like the start of me kind of just saying, why are you guys still calling this a roleplay fed?
Yeah, now you're angling everything.
It's in a roleplay fed. And so that kind of turned me on the place, and I kind of slowly lost interest. I eventually left just because of that sort of thing. Like I was just like, this isn't even a roleplay fed anymore. I don't know what you guys are trying to pull. This is nonsense. And we tried to be as amicable about it as possible, but they knew I wasn't having it, and I was just best apart. And ultimately, they came. One of their fed heads actually came out and said, "Well, yeah, we're you guys can roleplay if you want, but we're just going to write what we want." And that was basically like the death blow, and everybody else was like, screw it. And they closed the Fed after that.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
I know. Great. Awesome.
What's it like changing from 20 to 40 years old at the drop of a dime?
I don't really know what you're trying to get at here, Michael. Michael unlikable.
Good times. Okay.
Yeah.
You're viewed by many, including myself, as a legend in the game. What should people like us who have been handling for 20 plus years be doing to keeping the game going?
I like the little awe at the end. I don't know what that.
I had a lot of parentheses in there, so I wanted to add another one.
I mean, to keep it going, it's going to keep going. I mean, it's going to keep going unless wrestling stops being an interesting thing to people. Like I said, if wrestling goes in the toilet, you're probably going to see a big downturn in participation. If it gets hot again, then it'll turn up. I think that there are people who like to write. There are people who like wrestling. And if there are enough people who like wrestling who like to write, then it'll keep going no matter what we do. It's just, it's a subset of another thing. But the less wrestling fans there are, the less likely it is that there's going to be some new like 14 or 15-year-old kid who's like, oh, this looks kind of fun. Let's do this. You got to have those young guys who are coming up and kind of suck and they're kind of terrible, but they get in and they kind of learn what's good and what's terrible and bad, and they become better writers, and they, keep it going or not. I mean, it's not. I don't know that there's anything a person can do to save it if it's just, if wrestling's not going to be popular.
There you go. Linz, Mike Best, and Juice. Justin, F, Marry, Kill.
You love this question, don't you?
I love it so much. You even DM me about this one.
Well, I'm saying F on Lindsay because she's a girl. I'm saying Justin would be very difficult to live with. Even though he's a really good friend, I'd have to kill Justin.
And you got to marry Mike.
I could deal with that. Mike can go stay in another room, and I'll stay in my own room, and we don't have to do anything else.
Nice. You answered my last 2 questions already with other questions, so I'm going to skim over those.
Okay.
Moving over to She's Really Nice. It's Lynn's.
Well, I just got the handle.
What sandwich do you like best with soup?
Oh, the soup again. Man, I don't know.
Grilled cheese.
I don't know. Whatever is handed to me, I suppose.
What is your biggest regret in e-fedding, and why is it putting the EPW world title on Cameron Cruz for 7 seconds?
That's not the one. I don't regret that. All jokes aside, I don't regret that at all. Actually, they like to give Tom shit. But biggest regret in e-fedding, honestly, that whole thing with CSWA, I probably wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't do that again. That was like a cardinal rule breaking right there. It turned out fine.
It just happened to work out, yeah.
but you don't do that. I wouldn't do that again.
What do you enjoy more, posting stupid jokes on Facebook or making fun of Cowboys fans on Facebook?
I enjoy both a great deal. So what do I enjoy more? Probably
gotta be Cowboys fans.
I'm not sure I like that she called my jokes stupid. Yeah, making fun of Cowboys fans, that never gets old.
If Dan Ryan were to play an instrument in the Grammy Award-winning band Beating Dan Ryan, what would it be and why?
That's a stupid question. Nothing. He doesn't play instruments. Nothing.
Who are 1 or 2 old FW handlers that you'd like to see back in the game?
I mentioned Paul earlier. So Paul is one of those, and I would love to see Jamar back. I actually just talked to Jamar the other day. I'd love to see him back. Jamar Short.
Why does Hornet always win?
Because Hornet was the booker. That's why.
That's fairly simple.
Real simple.
Who are some characters that you didn't think much at first who ended up surprising you? And who are some characters that you had high hopes for and they fizzled out, not living up to expectations?
I think I don't, I thought about this question and I couldn't really think of too many that I didn't think much of first that ended up surprising. I kind of try to kind of open-minded about almost anyone. So I don't think there's not one name that kind of stands out for that one. High hopes and they ended up fizzling out. There have been a few, when I was fedheading that, you put a belt, like in an angle fed, for example, where you put a belt on and they just kind of fizzle out, or, I don't know that I really want to name names on something like that. But there's been a few, but I don't think that there's nothing egregious that comes to mind where, it's worth like pointing out like that. I mean,
DM him the same question, Linz.
Yeah, I think that just most of them just kind of settled into lesser roles, and it wasn't really that big of a deal.
Will you ever give Jeffrey Roberts another run anywhere?
So Jeffrey Roberts is that other character I mentioned that was in the new Alberta Fed. Honestly, a lot of his characteristics are kind of seeping into how I'm writing Dan Ryan now. So I'm not opposed to it, but he was more of a traditional, like, sociopath type, like a more of a true sociopath. And, some of those things, like I said, are like kind of being adapted into how I'm writing Dan Ryan now. So I don't know. I'm not opposed to it.
Not opposed to bringing back the new character.
No,
well, not a new character, but
right, an old character.
All right, in the form of a haiku, please tell everyone how great I am.
I got to come up with a haiku. Okay,
575, right?
Yeah. Okay. How great Lindsay is. Lindsay is the best. Don't write a murder role play. She is sensitive.
There you go.
There we go.
All right. This is what we're going to end on. Lynn's left us a great word association game. I'm going to hit you with a word, and I want you to hit me with the first thought that comes to your head. It doesn't have to be one word, just first idea that comes up. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to do it backwards to surprise you.
Okay.
Lindsay Troy.
Well, like I said, was really happy to be part of her breaking out, and she's one of my best friends in the hobby.
EPW.
EPW, I'm proud of what we did with it. People seem to enjoy it. I enjoyed it, so I'm glad.
And APW.
I mentioned a little bit before. It was a fun little Fed. It was a regional thing. It was fun to kind of write in more of an NWA kind of style.
Defiance.
First Angle Fed. It was fun. I mean, learning to like Angle Feds to begin with, and I met more people that I'm good friends with still. I had a good time.
GXW.
GXW. It was. I'm repeating myself a lot here now.
It was a Fed that I was in. Yeah.
It was a Fed that I was in. It was I guess I could say it was the first one where I had any sort of like leadership role. So I kind of learned a lot about, what it takes to be a fedhead in GXW.
Okay, the CSWA.
CSWA was definitely my breakthrough Fed on a larger scale. It's great for that purpose as in my mind, as far as I'm concerned.
D exclamation point.
So D was a character in New Alberta. The guy's name was Diego. I'm real friends with him on Facebook a little bit. He was he was a weird dude, but really, really creative. And that was just his name, just D. He just yelled the letter D at people.
We have the D in Defiance, so I get it.
That's right. You have the D. This guy was D. He would just say it, and he would write out D said real loud. It's kind of funny.
Hans, the incontinent Viking.
All right. These are going to take some explaining. Hans, the incontinent Viking, and the one right above it, which is Akita, the ventriloquist telepath. These are just ridiculously stupid joke characters that I created for an angle. In EPW, there was a character named Irish Red, and he was feuding with me as the kayfabe owner. And part of it was that to get a match with me, he had to go through a gauntlet of people. And instead of giving him a gauntlet of the best people in the Fed, I created the most stupid things I could have come up with. To force him and to actually have matches and force him to role play against these people. So Hans the Incontinent Viking is exactly what it sounds like. He was a Viking who couldn't get through a promo because he had to run away and take a shit. That was the entire character. He would just talk, stop in the middle of a sentence, and be like, I have to go. And that was it. And I made him role play against this guy. I went back and forth with him 4 times. It was probably humiliating, and I enjoyed every second of it. And then Akita, which is the next one, just as ridiculous. The entire character, he's Akita, the ventriloquist telepath, was. So his entire thing was he was like an Inuit, which is an Eskimo. He was an Inuit guy who was also a ventriloquist and a telepath. So his promos only consisted of the interior of an igloo, and in the middle of the igloo was a wooden stool with a ventriloquist dummy sitting on it. And then Akita would be off to the side, just staring intensely at the dummy, as if he's just focusing really hard on it. And no one would say anything, but you, the reader, would just hear a promo in your head. And it's just as stupid as it sounds, intentionally. And again, I made him have a role play match against this character. And we went back and forth a little bit, and it was again humiliating, and it was again very enjoyable for me. And as a reward for making him go through this, I did put him over in the match. So
that was nice of you. Hellfighter Patrick Shutt.
So unless you know Patrick, it's hard to explain Patrick. Patrick was a really nice guy, but kind of a lot of Feds have these guys where they're real nice guys, but they're kind of simpletons. And I think that he's most known. Well, for one thing, he wasn't very good at this, but a real nice guy, so people kind of put up with it. But then he would get kind of overly nice. So, like, if there was some hint that he offended you, he would send you like 5 long private messages apologizing, and this really long, and you just be like, "Oh my God, I'll forgive you if you just shut up."
And he's emotional.
He is, and he's most known for, I think, among some of us, for regrettably posting a photo of himself in what I can only describe as like a male glamour shot photo.
Oh no!
It was like, glamour shots, right? So he was like in this little suit with like a fedora on his head.
Oh no!
Like tipped forward with like his hand on it, like tipping it forward. And the photo snapped at that moment, and he shared it with everyone. And so he was just clowned on that the rest of the time I knew him. And he's around somewhere. I saw him somewhere not too long ago, but yeah, he just was unfortunate.
Max Kale.
Okay, so Max is one of the best like world building storytellers I've ever seen in this hobby. I think one of the most unique writers in this hobby. I didn't know anything about Max when I came to High Octane. I didn't know him at all. I had not really heard of Max. He's so creative, and he's also really willing to like talk about character development with almost anyone. And I don't know if people realize that, if you ask Max, his opinion on something that you're writing, a lot of people will be like, okay, I'll give you something, I'll give you a little something, whatever. He'll give you really, really detailed really useful feedback. When I was still trying to kind of adapt to the style, I asked him, like, what do you think of this? Or what do you think of that? And like I said, I don't expect necessarily a lot of stuff back, but he gave me a lot of really, really useful feedback that, I took to heart and incorporated. And he's just a really, really good storyteller. He's one of the best.
He really is. And a guy, like you said, I didn't know much about before I went to Hell. And caught me off guard with how good he was. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think anybody with a really unique gimmick like he has is sometimes, like, if you've been in the hobby a long time, like we've both been in the hobby a long time. So a lot of times gimmicks are just gimmicks. There's not a lot of depth, right? It's just like a shock value thing. And so there's loads of depth to Max Kale. I mean, there's more than, you'd have to read for a while to get the full story. It's just he's just really good at building that world around him.
The way I describe him is there are so many villains in this game, but there's only one super villain, and that's Max Kale.
Yeah, for sure.
Mikey Unlikely.
Well,
speaking of glamour shots.
Well, he's an asshole, clearly. Easy to talk to, easy to work with. I appreciate you especially for some of the things I've said before, which is we can shit talk each other.
Yes.
Like face to face and just laugh, because it's my favorite thing to do. You're really easy to talk to. I know that I can send you a little private comment about things that have nothing to do with nothing, and just kind of clown on something else and just laugh about it.
Yeah, we're good buddies.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Mark Wyndham.
So Mark Wyndham is the guy that I beat for that CSWA World Championship. So he holds that spot, and I'll always remember that. Stephen Thomas is who wrote him. Another guy who wrote. He actually wrote Lindsay Troy's first husband, Joey Melton. So if anybody knows who Joey Melton is, Lindsay's ex.
Caster Strife.
So Caster Strife, he's a guy. That's the handler's name is Billy Ferraro, and he was fairly notorious on the FWC circus. I don't know. Do you remember Billy at all?
I don't know him, but I do know the character name.
You know that character name? So yeah, he was really, really, really good. He was a guy who was very difficult to beat. Also, I'm not even sure if I hold a win over Castor. He was world champion in NFW for a while, and he was in some other feds too. Billy is actually really similar to Mike Best. They're very similar about, the way they kind of like to stir up some chaos for fun sometimes. Very similar. He was a really talented guy too. He's into politics a lot now. He runs for office up in New York and stuff. He's all straightened out.
The Egg Bandits.
I mean, they're fun. The Egg Bandits are a lot of fun to read, and all those guys are fun to talk to too. So I mean, they're entertaining. I enjoy reading them.
The Kevin Powers.
So Kevin Powers is Eric Ziba's primary character. Eric was one of the co-runners of GXW. He was, a lot of his like competitive success was kind of before mine. But Eric was, a good friend in the hobby for a long time. He's still a friend on Facebook. Good guy.
Rob Sampson.
So my best friend in the hobby for most of the early years was a guy named Chad Dupree. He's the one that got me into NBW. That was his fed. He was the one that I met in IWA. We were good buddies for a while. He was genuinely the nicest person I've ever met in my entire life. I never heard a bad word about anybody from him, and I never heard anybody say anything bad about him. He's the only e-fedder I've ever to this day met in person.
Nice.
I went in the summer of '98. I flew up to he lived in a little town in Ohio called Peebles, Ohio, and I went up there for a week. We drove up to Dayton. We went to ECW Heatwave '98 together.
Nice.
Sat on the floor, had a blast. And then like a year or two later, unfortunately, he went in for like an elective surgery, and in recovery had complications, had a heart attack.
Whoa.
And died at 29 years old. So, the most stunned I've ever been in any way associated with this hobby, because that was real life. You can still, if you go over to the FW Central forums, and if you do a search on his name, Chad Dupree, you can still see like the post is still there where I had to let everyone know that he died. Like I got a phone call from one of his friends up there locally, and I had to let everybody know, and it was crazy.
That's nuts.
Yeah, he was young. He was my age, This was like, anyways. That's Chad. He was a great guy.
Cecil Worth Farthington.
So I've said publicly and to him that Colin's pretty much my favorite e-fedder. I just really enjoy Colin a lot as a person. I first met Colin over there when he on FWC when he was doing some tournament. Maybe it was Ultra Title. I don't know. But me and Colin used to get into like instant message conversations where we would just riff like trash talky joke type stuff for hours and hours. Because Colin, right?
Yeah.
And he's so funny and smart, and real funny. And based on those conversations, he joined EPW with Cecil Worth Farthington back then. And this was years ago when EPW was still around. He did a tag team. He won a tag title there with Cecil Worth. I loved the character. Even then, I was like, man, I would tell people I was really excited about pushing the character, but Colin wasn't really like, really digging Efedding as much at the time, and kind of went in and out of different feds, and and I didn't realize he was writing until I came to High Octane, and now he's just about as good as it gets.
Eric Dane.
Well, that's Justin. Obviously, we go back a long way, and like you said, we haven't had an actual match.
Crazy! I can't believe that.
I know, we've been around each other forever and never had a match, so we'll see what happens.
Bronson Box.
Bronson, that's Evan. As you know Evan.
Yep.
Evan, really creative guy. Again, he was really good. Especially in that angle fed environment. Just really good at it. He didn't always like want to stick with it though. So, I mean, the disappointing thing about him is he would get excited about the brainstorming and then not as excited with the execution, I think, as my experience with Evan.
I know a couple guys like that.
Yeah. So, but I mean, real good. I mean, if he ever came back, he had, Bronson Box is a great character. It's a real fun character to write with. I had a lot of fun, like, riffing promos off of him, because he wrote Bronson as a little bit of a straightforward kind of psycho sort of character, Bronson Box. And with me having like the snarky sort of sarcastic side to how I was writing Dan Ryan at the time, it was a real natural kind of flow whenever we would like promo off of each other. So
Mike Best.
So I met Mike through him and Justin making up from the old drama, which I didn't know anything about. And Mike, I think Mike did he did a podcast with
up.
Justin. Yeah, mic'd up. He did. So Justin went on mic'd up, and part of them like burying the hatchet, Mike was going to do like a review of just the most recent Defiance show. And he was gonna review like the whole Fed, like how he liked or what he thought about the website, the way we did results, and then he was gonna do like a show. So on that particular show, I had like a promo near the top of the show. It was I think a tag promo with me and Lindsay were tagging up, and I had a promo on there, and he, I think, liked or thought some of what I had written in that promo was funny. He commented on it in the podcast, and I just like hit him up and said, "Hey, thanks for the compliment, whatever." And it wasn't a big deal, and I didn't really talk to him again until I showed up here. And I think that I was, what was kind of cool is that I didn't come into knowing Mike knowing any of like reputation stuff. So anything that people know Mike Best for, like I don't know him personally for anything other than my one-on-one experience with him. And what I think is kind of funny, what I found to be kind of funny about Mike is how much of a diplomatic sort of calming influence he is behind the scenes when his public persona is so, stir shit up.
Yeah.
But then like, I get into a situation where I'm writing with him, like in a group, and we get into like private chats, and I would occasionally like express something, and he'd be like, "Oh, that's not really fair." And I'm like, "You're telling me like I need to," I just thought it was funny. Like I found
Mike Best is preaching to you.
Not preaching, but just like I found myself being like, "Oh, you got a point. Maybe I should not be so hard on him." And I don't really find myself as someone who's hard on a lot of people, but I do have like a side of me where if I'm not in the mood, I'll get, irritated with something. And then he of all people would tell me, "Hey dude, it's not, calm down." Like, oh, okay, well.
Mike is great behind the scenes. His character's a dick, and he's really fucking hard to beat.
I know. He's just really, really good at it, and which I obviously appreciate because I love doing that too, and it's just fun.
MJ Flair.
So I really liked MJ Flair as a babyface character a lot. I was a big fan of MJ Flair when when I initially saw Pete. You know, obviously I've known Pete forever and ever.
Did you know Pete wrote a book?
Yeah, I've heard.
It's available over at Amazon.com. It's called One Chance Legend of Valerian's Garden.
Let's put the link in the show description. So I mean, obviously I was around him more for Eli Flair, which is MJ's kayfabe dad, and even more so for Impulse. You know, Impulse was around Defiance, and he was in EPW with me and in other feds. Now MJ, I liked her a lot as a babyface. I thought she worked really well as a babyface. He and I did kind of disagree on when he started writing her as more like a snarky kind of teen brat kind of character.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it went over as well with the HOW audience, that direction. But I mean, Pete's still, you know, he's a big, you know, from my circle, he was a big deal in the hobby. He wrote tons of stuff. He wrote lots of characters, and I wish he had tried a different, or gone back to the original direction for MJ, but you know, that's okay.
Spooky Doom.
So do you know anything about Spooky Doom?
I've heard the name a million times.
Okay, so my main interaction with Spooky Doom, he's like, as far as I could tell during the Ultra title time, he was basically kind of just a troll.
Okay.
He wrote a character that trolled everyone.
Yeah.
And this was like a spooky Undertaker-ish character sort of parody. You know what I mean? My main remembrance of interaction with him is that I wasn't in the tournament, but I was an admin on the forum, so I had to deal with all the OOC stuff from all the outside people coming in and getting involved, and he annoyed a lot of people because he was a troll basically. And so my main interaction with him was that he wanted really badly to get like a custom like title, you know, the title that goes underneath your little avatar there.
Yes.
He wanted a custom one. Now some of us had one, like admins, like I had like Consigliere as mine at one point, and you know, like Chad had the Godfather under his, right? And he wanted, I don't remember what he wanted. He wanted a custom title. So I told him, and I wish I remember what the song was, but I told him that if he got on his bicycle or on a bicycle and rode it through his little town where he lived, which he had been talking about, singing that song loudly enough for everyone around him to hear it, and he videoed himself doing it and posted it and showed us, that I would give him his custom title. And he did it.
Oh my God.
He did it, and he loudly sang, I wish I remember what the song was. He sang this song. There was some ridiculous little parody song. And he videoed it, and he submitted it, and I gave him his title.
I got lucky and knew Pete, so when I joined up to FW, he immediately gave me a custom title.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was just a thing people do.
I mean, I think there became a time where it wasn't that big of a deal anymore. So they just give them to anybody.
Hey, hold on now. Jonathan Mars.
Jonathan Marks. That's Paul Miller, who's, I don't know. I don't want to talk too bad about too many people, but he's one of the few people who I just flat out couldn't stand in the hobby. He pulled this move where he tried to go around like making up things, negative things about me to my handlers when I was an Empire Pro.
Ooh.
And just trying to stir up shit because he had his own Fed and he was basically trying to poach people. Is the way I looked at it. Unfortunately, all of my handlers came straight to me with screenshots. So I threw him out of the Fed, and then it became public knowledge what he did, and the other admins wanted to ban him from the forums, which would have meant that his Fed was toast, right? Because he ran his Fed on the forums. So the bright side, I guess, if depending on how you want to look at it, was I didn't make him do this, but he came to me and basically begged me not to let them ban him. He had to come crawling to me and apologize for what he tried to pull. And so I was able to say, okay. Just kind of let him grovel and then say, okay. So he kept his Fed, was just kind of there in disgrace, and that's all I have to say about Paul Miller.
Craig Miles.
The handler was John Katz, and he was one of the Fed heads of NFW. I always got along. I guess I should be talking about the character. It was a good character. He had a tag team with another character called Eddie Mayfield, and they were called the Professionals. They were one of the top tag teams on the circuit for a long time. It was a good character. John ran NFW for a long time. I always got along with him really well. He could be a little passive aggressive at times, but because NFW was almost always competing with EPW for top EFED and all of the polls and stuff they would do on our circuit. So occasionally he would be like, "Oh yeah, you guys are doing great," but then kind of be passive aggressive about it. if NFW didn't get enough mention, that sort of thing. But he was okay. I was okay with him.
Big Dog.
Big Dog was a character over on the A1 wrestling circuit. And I feuded with him a little bit over there. I think we may have traded the belt a few times, and then we had an angle where we started teaming up after we had finished feuding, and I think we won a few tag team titles together. His handler is a guy named Phil Benet, and he's another one of the nicest people, just incorruptible people, to the point where I could make just a harmless snarky joke to you or something. But if I made that joke to Phil, he'd be like, "Oh, come on, man, that's not fair." Right? He was just the nicest. He was not one for anything, just being the nicest guy.
Eddie Love.
Eddie Love is the character that was brought in for that War Games match that just smashed me up the chair. And the thing is
so you were salty.
Yeah, well, and absolutely nothing against him. He wasn't involved in that decision. As far as he knew, this was just an angle that they were doing. He and I wasn't even supposed to know about it, obviously. So I didn't talk to him about it. He didn't talk to me about it. We didn't really even know each other. I don't really blame him for it, but unfortunately, he's just the one who was there for that.
Duchess.
And Duchess, I talked about before, is a 5'0" nothing, 100 nothing girl character that was poorly written and poorly booked.
# girl character. Love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the epitome of that.
Very good. Well, Brunk, that's all we got on the question side of things.
Nice.
That was a good little interview.
Well, good. I probably will not listen to it.
Good. But you'll get a lot of feedback from your friends, so that's all that matters.
Yeah, that doesn't mean it's not any good.
Well, before we let you go, is there anything else you want to plug, promote, cover?
I mean, I don't have anything to plug. I just write my little stories in HOW, and that's about it.
Check out HOWrestling.com and HO Wrestling on Twitter. That's where Brunk is currently handling. Brunk, thanks so much for taking the time and joining us today. This was a lot of fun.
Sure, man. Anytime.
Well, everybody, what an episode that was. We got to sit and talk to Brunk. We got to hear all about Dan Ryan and his great history. We got to hear about EPW and the feds he ran as well. We got to hear about the EFED podcast question of the week and your favorite EFED character names. And we started the countdown of your favorite EFED characters. This has been a lot of fun. The EFED podcast keeps growing, and the things we're doing keep changing, and it's been a blast. And I'm looking forward to next week when we drop another 30 names of the EFED podcast Top 100. So make sure you tune in once again to see who else made that list. And we're going to keep going, counting down from there. You're going to get another 30 the next week, and then the final 10 the final week. We're excited. Keep your eyes on the YouTube channel. Just search the EFED podcast. It'll pop up, and we will have some countdown videos on there as well coming up. We've broke out the green screen. We've been recording. It's been a lot of fun. And of course, as always, check out the Patreon, patreon.com/Efed podcast. We appreciate everyone over there who is supporting us each and every week, each and every month. And you can too for as low as $3 a month. Check it out at patreon.com/Efed podcast. Of course, for Brian, the producer of the show, I'm Mikey, the host of the Efed podcast. Thanks for listening, where the wrestling is written, but the characters are real.
The Efed podcast, only on the Atomic Jobcast Network, presented commercial free on Patreon.